I reviewed yesterday's recording. तो अगर आप जोर से नहीं बोलेंगे कुछ भी रिकॉर्ड नहीं होगा आपकी आवाज बिल्कुल ही रिकॉर्ड नहीं. You also have to be as faculty we have to be loud enough. आगे आ जाओ because we're sitting in a round.
Can you set also some of this like that all we will later so that the load is something well yeah, that's fine. Right. Visible? Audible as well. Right. So, good morning, all. And so, just a quick round of introduction because I will be speaking a lot about me and my work before I start the lectures. Just so that you know that there is one more space that we are working on, and we move. So. Shall name? Digambar. Okay. Ritik. Okay. Oh, great. So I think Rahul and I are meeting face to face for the first time. Okay, great. So I'm Anmol, right? But before I start and before I quickly introduce of the type of work that I am doing and then getting into the lecture, I would like to ask you guys that why have you taken this course? What are your expectations?
So you know you're right. First session, second session, or Rajbi. See, every time a new faculty comes, they would want to benchmark. What happens is we need to reset where we are speaking and where we are coming from based on what the class is. So you have to tell about yourself more and more as we have more instructors. So
there are two motivations. My initial motivation was I have to complete my training. Both the external ones is not badly. But when I did the first class, as sir mentioned that if you have any other option, go for that because this is a tough course. But when sir explained about creating a product,
right,
that caught my attention, and I wanted to create something. I have few ideas, and at the end of the course, I will make sure that I create one of those.
Okay, great. And rest of you, just one or two lines will be okay.
Basically, I do the electronic design course. So I really like the project. Because I like the process.
Okay, great. Right. So we will be getting more time to come to that question again and again because design is like that. But anyway, I did this lab at HCD department. With primary focus being on HD. Right. What you notice over here is UX and design research. And apart from that, you see all these different technologies that are there. Point being that within design, we have different ways in which we can approach a problem or the way we can mold our careers, right? We can either be generalists, that jack of all, or we can either be specialists, right? I'm somewhere between generalist and in between. I'm not sure whether I will call myself a specialist still, but I'm learning. But primary area is AR, VR, and any emerging technologies that are there, right? To give you some examples of the work that we did, which utilizes design thinking, right? So this was one of the BTPs that try to understand how augmented reality can enhance tourism. Fine. Now, typically what happens is as engineers, because I also come from an engineering background, we get a problem statement कि भैया आपको tourism बढ़ाना है. Immediately the mind runs कि let's create a web portal or let's create a mobile application that people will log on to, right? And then they will get this information. Now, this is a very analytical approach because we have been taught to deal with systems to create these systems, right? But when I talk to a designer, the designer will say, भैया आपकी जरूरत क्या है? Pamphlet बना दो. Why do I even need a web portal for that matter, right? So the whole notion is that design always puts a question to the tech part as to why do we need to do this, right? And for that, we start with different methods that are there, reaching out to people, conducting field surveys and all. And in fact, most of these projects, they sort of dealt with that. Like this one is in VR. Now, these are not physical products. These are all software that I'm talking about. There have been aspects that I've dealt with physical products as well. But again, understanding the requirements from students psychologically, like what is it that these guys face problem in, like public speaking and all, and how can we mitigate that? Some really interesting work that like students did in the past were, this was from a previous institute. This is a mobile app called Buzz for the people who are hard of hearing, right, for deaf people. And the insights were such that you know, since the communication and the attention span of the attention has to be redirected to a particular task, right? Specifically very mundane tasks. कि घर पे कोई आ गया है, you're not able to know that. दूध उबल गया, all those things. So how do we tackle these challenges? Okay. So creating a product that is able to highlight, that is also synced with the wearables, giving vibrations or haptic feedbacks such that people are able to understand.
So just interjecting over here, because their group actually came up or presented an idea yesterday,
Right.
where they said that, so this is the project that they did in the ESC course also, which was that when we have deaf and dumb people, they would usually interact with sign language.
Right.
And people like you and me would not understand it. When they go to a banking place or somewhere, then these people are not able to communicate their needs and requirements. So they have proposed that they would want to work on a product. Now that's still to be defined, but that's the present idea. They want to work on a product through which a person can communicate with others in sign language. That is, others who do not know sign language will also be able to understand a person's sign language and act accordingly.
Right.
So what you are showing over here is on the other side of it, that there is a person who is not able to hear, is not able to get that sensory input.
Right.
How do you communicate to them?
Right.
They are working on a project. How do they communicate with other people? So
yes.
that's very complementary and
Yeah.
closed loop thing in a way. So
Right.
I think you should find out more about this work and the project.
Right? So there are like a lot of explorations that goes in because the sign language part also came in when we were initially discussing. Now, this is just a student project, went on for around 1 or 2 semesters, right? And I will not say that this is a fully crystallized product that we came up with. It's just a concept. But nonetheless, Morse code actually interestingly came out to be one of the means in which we can sort of create these haptic feedbacks for these people. And not only that, not just a product, but creating a whole ecosystem. That what if these products are launched into the market and how can we sort of have a complete ecosystem where we have hardware, software integration along with different people who can get associated with. So these are some of the examples, right? I will cover 2 aspects and they all in some way form a part of design thinking. Right? Now, this is a very rudimentary lecture, which typically deals with making you understand what is design. So that you break out from that notion that design is just beautification of things. Right? It goes much deeper. And luckily we now have awareness and Steve Jobs ke quotes sab laga dete har jagah. Right? So design is something invisible. So treat them as one, but just for the sake of in this lecture, I'm just saying UX design, and then I'll jump into design. Right? UX becomes an important aspect. How many of you are aware of this discipline? User experience design. UX तो सुना ही होगा, UI, UX. ना wireframes बनाते हैं, Figma पे काम करते हैं, and that is what everyone is thinking it is, right? But look at the definition. All aspects of end users' interaction with a company, its services and its product. So at the moment, we are perhaps thinking only about the products. But look at the spectrum or the breadth this definition is covering UX, right? It's saying that a company ko bhi le lo apne saath. All the services that this company is providing, but all together focusing on how best we can achieve the goal of creating, satisfied, happy, peaceful customers, or whichever way it's ready. How many of you are a fan of IICT's website? So some days back, I was trying to book a Tatkal. Now the UX or the interface has improved quite a lot, but still we find a lot of glitches. Like this is some early screenshot, I think just before this one came out. It used to give us panic when we were booking Tatkal tickets, and anyway, the information was haphazard. And if you didn't see, there is like a lot of visual clutter over here, a lot of advertisements and other things, right? In tomorrow's session, I will be covering some aspects of UX in more details, which are principles which have been derived from cognitive psychology. But really, if you see, the way we are able to look at things is from a central vision and then the peripheral vision, right? Now, if you really see, your eyes may go on this part because that is the first central, it comes in a central vision, and also it is a lot of emphasis because of this color, which is dark. But much of the information is also perceived through the peripheral vision. We may tend to ignore it, or we may, but peripheral vision actually causes a lot of, or basically it leads to a lot of information gain in time. And we will cover those aspects. But nonetheless, because of all this visual clutter, this sort of did not make sense. Firstly, it's hard to navigate, and then the interaction flow, don't talk about it. Then they have improved the wording. Like, still, there are certain challenges. So, like I was telling, some days back, I was trying to book a Tatkal ticket. So, to book that, you may have a passenger list, right? जहाँ पे आप पहले से नाम डाल देते हो, and then you are able to sort of say कि fine, this is veg, this is non-veg, and whatever food preferences you give. I'm booking for Vande Bharat. They do not have veg or non-veg. They have tea and snacks. And it is not taking in my inputs. Why? Just because there is tea and snacks missing from that in the list. So I was like, you have few minutes of windows, and I was trying to figure out what is going wrong. So I said, okay, let's change the food preference. Let's redo the whole thing, and the ticket was booked. Not in the class that I wanted, but it's fine. But it leads to a poor user experience. Right? Whosoever created the list, the developer, the designer, they should have accounted for this thing. But the database should automatically tally things, should not put the burden on the user. Right? So altogether, when we talk about digital products, that is what most of you will be creating. Right? I mean, now we can say interactive products as well, but the primary goal is to have it very effectively used, right? The way it interacts with people should be easy for people to understand. Why not? I mean, the whole landscape has changed. If you really see different websites, they're all utilizing UX now. Amazon has done it big time. Especially you see iterations after every few months in Amazon. But there are certain consistencies as well. The screen sizes are changing, right? So we need to think about that. How can we design for different screens? And this is only from a perspective of web design or application design. But most of the products that you also design, like the hardware IoT products, you have a physical interface over there, and these principles also hold true. So, for example, these. How many of you are aware of any of these devices? Which one? Great. Alexa, Google Home. So Alexa is a voice user interface, completely screenless, right? You get the feedbacks through this rotating LED that is over there. And it is using the directions to point out where the input is coming from and to give notifications, information, or any other thing. I would say it is quite good. These are Google Pixel Buds, real-time translation, a thermostat, Nest, which Google acquired, an IoT product, which can be synced to different devices. This one tells us what are bad products and what are good products. इसमें ये बोलते हैं कि this bag is good because you can drag it. This science bottle is doing the work. The gravity is doing all the work, right? So this sort of sauce डालेगा जिलेट a very user-centered design. These remotes are sort of obsolete because now we have these things, and they all say that this is good UX. What is the underlying factor behind all these? I mean, definitely it's user-centered, but what else led from this to this bottle to this bottle, and from this remote to this remote?
Convenient.
Convenient, less effort, right? So this drive to make things more easy for people to consume. But at the same time, technology played an inherent role in that. We cannot divide design from technology. In fact, I would say design is technology. Fine. So any designer, any person who counters that, technology, no. See, this was an era where these bags were used, leather bags. Now it is an antique. But new material information, the way we can create lighter bags with more strength, right? That led to this thing. Inventions, new material science, and whatever, right? Similar with this one, a bottle of plastic, because previously plastics were brittle. Now it is malleable and you can sort of just squeeze it. Voice user interface came, that is why these remotes became obsolete. So behind all user experiences that you are able to now create, technology is an underlying factor. So do not drive your design just by technology, but you have to go hand in hand. That is what I'm trying to say over here. Okay? So anything that you design, you will be thinking about technology because you are engineers. But at the same time, bring in the perspective of users. Achha, if I make this thing, will people understand this or not? Now, let's look at some of the biggest fails that happened primarily because of bad UX. So now this is a 3 Miles Island accident that happened in 1979, somewhere around Pennsylvania in US. So the thing was that these operators, they were sort of working in that plant, nuclear plant. And one of the operators was not able to decide whether the digit being shown is 9 or 6. Fine. So there was a typographical error because that led to an accident, sort of like he turned off all the safety in the sense like he was operating in just like a normal day. He said, okay, the readings are showing that it is fine. So he turned off all the measures that are there and they were unable to decide whether the plant is heating up or not. And that could have led to a big disaster. Luckily, it was curtailed that way. And the whole burden then fell on the user. Because of this particular operator, we were about to face the consequences. But was it really though? It is a bad interface. The user is not able to perceive what is happening. So how can you put the blame on the user? Many a times you will often face that, yeah, I have created this product, but लोगों को समझ नहीं आ रहा. Who was at fault? Lincoln Cars, a luxury brand, fine. They created this version wherein you had a sports mode and a start and stop button. So while cruising, people would actually, when they wanted to go in sports mode, they would accidentally press stop. So high-speeding car would immediately stop, which is not a good thing. And they had to recall some 14,000 cars back. Minute things, sports button and stop button, a sports mode or a stop mode. right? Glucometer. In fact, in healthcare, UX is becoming a big deal right now. You see that people measure their glucose levels, right? And it is actually, I don't know, can you read it? 24? It's actually 2.4. And exactly that is the screw up. Because most of the people who are using it are firstly elderly population, or somewhere around that age group. And even if that is not, the decimal has been placed in a wrong place. And thus the perception is that it is 24, making them take more insulin shots, which can be dangerous for their lives, in fact. You understand the power of UX now? It is dealing with very trivial things. And it's not just UX, it's the way we are able to conceive the products. We have to go back to the user, we have to understand it. And apart from understanding, we have to understand the technical requirements and the challenges that are there. Okay. So yes, a good UX prevents disasters. If not just for certain cases, UX can be used in a broad spectrum of things. And behind all of this lies something called as, design. क्या है ये design? You have this mysterious department called Department of Human-Centered Design. I've been to 2 or 3 design schools, and everywhere people are fascinated by design. Our design department was these guys are very creative. You know, they do beautiful sketches, they create beautiful sculptures, whatnot. I mean, that is what people perceive. So design by itself is a very problematic word. Someone said electronic system design. Design came in. I'm an interaction designer, or I do interaction design. VLSI design. UX design. But if I say I am doing design, what type of design do you do? Design can never appear alone as it is. So you have something, a noun which is associated with that. And design can both be a noun and a verb. You're creating sketches, concepts and all, right? That may become something like your noun and other things, but it is also an activity. Prototyping something, designing a product for people, which involves an action, and it becomes a verb. But all in all, it is something very abstract. You cannot just define it as it is. It always has to come with something. Simpler things, and some of the definitions which say from the desired state moving to an intended state. Sometime back, when we were working on a project with Anuj and I, and they were we got this product which is a water controller from a company, and they had this interface which was very complex. We wanted to simplify it. So the desired current state and the intended state, right? We want to make it much simpler. Some people say that is what design is, right? But it all involves people. And design is like, it can have many ways in which you can define it. Some say it is the very way we think about things creatively. There are other definitions, and I will let you guys look at it. But all these definitions say that design is not occurring alone. It will encompass most of the things. It will work with many people, get multiple viewpoints, right? And that is why the complexity comes in. If you're working with a designer, or maybe there are people from different groups in your, or different disciplines in your groups, or perhaps different groups working together, they all may lead to a very complex scenario, because, you know, we all have this ego. Sometimes we also call it as engineer's conceit. The engineer the engineer thinks that this is what it is. We don't have to fall in that. And that is why we need to take a look at it, right? So across, you see, it has multitude of activities and procedures. All it's saying is that it is a multidisciplinary, perhaps an interdisciplinary discipline, right? And it really becomes important to understand what is the object of the study that we are going to within design. So for example, this is an entertainment system. At the back of the car, you have these screens which have been attached, and the user can actually see different videos, movies, or whatever on the go while the vehicle is moving. But to implement the system, there is a huge backend that was, or that has to be created, right? So how can you have transmissions within a moving vehicle? What will be the protocols that you have to follow, right? Vehicular networks and IoT, and you are bringing in all those different things, different algorithms. And apart from that, there has to be rules and regulations that have to follow. So some dealing with policy, some dealing with personal data, locations, organizations, roles, the whole service that is to be provided, and that really contributes to the methods. So if you really see, just to provide this particular experience, you have a huge infrastructure that is going on at the back. And they all have been designed consciously, one way or the other. Primarily UX designers versus screen ke saath limited ho gayi. And it is fine. One is going to the so the artifacts can really be different things. Hardware component, a software component that we deal with, and so many other parts that comes associated with. And the context becomes really important in this case. किसके लिए design कर रहे हो? कौन से scenario में होगा? Where will this thing go? Where will this product be used? And so on and so forth. These are the things that we have to consider. Any doubts? Anything that you guys want to ask? No? So let's move on to another concept that is quite interesting. And this brings us to a human-centered design. In fact, we will come across a cycle which is often meant or often said that it deals with design thinking. Right? And in the name of design thinking, you will actually stumble upon those cycles again and again. But there will be at one point of time, perhaps tomorrow, I will start discussing about different types of thinking. Because why are you calling it design thinking? Thinking is thinking, right? What is the science behind that? But anyway, human-centered design then sprouted from all these crappy products that came in. And it was created by IDEO first. And in fact, Don Norman is also associated with giving us this notion of human-centered design. Wherein we focus on things to be centered around human needs, then create them. But for the sake of this lecture, I will go ahead with human-centered design and this cycle that it covers. But personally, in my viewpoint, this is a very condescending approach. Human. Because we are only thinking about ourselves as a species only, right? If I really think or move away from the philosophies that we have had in India, it sort of looked at the whole ecosystem. And you will not be surprised because the very persons who, or people who sort of propose this thing, human-centered design, have now said that this thing has become obsolete. And they are now focusing on, in fact, Don Norman, he's one of those persons, he's now focusing on humanity-centered design. One of the lectures I heard from Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design, I think the person who runs that institute, I'm forgetting her name, some years back, she mentioned nature-centered design. Right? So there are different dimensions coming to this, but since you're creating products which will be used by human users, this is fine, human-centered design. So there was actually an ISO standard for this. And adopt multidisciplinary skills and perspective. So भैया आप लोग भी gear up because now you are doing a small course on design what I would ask you is to broaden the horizon of the thoughts. Take into perspective that, so let's also think from the perspective of other people, right? Understanding users, tasks, environments, evaluations, consideration of full user experience, not just a particular device-centric thing. Involvement of users throughout the design and development, and which is again an iterative process. Put simply, the cycle somewhat looks like this. There is no head and tail for this. All the arrows are there, but what it really means is you can start anywhere. If you see, all the arrows are pointing everywhere. Fine. So there is no linear process. पहले आप ये करोगे, फिर ये करोगे, ऐसे करोगे नहीं. You can start anywhere in the whole process, but typically we start with understanding what is the problem, and this becomes a very important point for us. Is it even a problem that we are thinking? ये हो रहा है, but is it a problem, right? So one of the examples over here, I think by IDEO. So IDEO got one of this project wherein I think somewhere in Africa they had to basically clean water supply karna tha to a village in Africa. Right? And they started with cleaning, creating all these water purifiers and other things. But they were noticing that people are time and time again going and using that traditional means, either wells or hand pumps, which had a lot of bacteria and all. So the problem here was not about creating devices or mechanisms for clean water, but what they eventually understood was that it dealt with the perception of people. What they perceive is culturally, in that sense, ki दूसरे sources से पानी लेना है. So they actually worked on creating educational materials rather than creating water purification techniques eventually. So this is a very interesting thing because you start with the problem in your mind. Ki, acha, we need to create water purifiers so that people can have clean water. But when you go to the field, you notice that acha, purifier is not working. So you have this diverse cycle. Diverge, converge. What it means is that initially you identify the problem, identify your users and what are the needs. And for that, you may need to go to the field, do a lot of survey, etc. And then start converging, where you sort of want to have a lot of ideas, a lot of brainstorming session. And again, this would diverge and converge. So the cycle goes on. It's like saying without right? And then finally narrowing down your whole idea or the product eventually. And then again, this is an iterative cycle. Sort of goes on and sort of like it is both an analysis and a synthesis that is going on simultaneously. Question?
एक challenge है when we start building something, so there is a trade-off between what you are creating, kind of the features of a device, and then the user experience.
Right.
So, for example, you have shown an example of remote. So that remote is having the good design is having on the phone. But until unless it is advertised better, until unless people know how to use this very well, you cannot launch it into the market. Otherwise, it will take possible. So how to find a trade-off for an unadvertised?
If you see, like, I will not say ki we need to train people to do things. Advertisement is definitely a big part, in fact, and that all can be put into this whole part of UX design. You know, the strategy in which you are able to convey the features and functionalities. But really now we see that the manuals are disappearing because we want our products in a way that intuitively when people look at it, they are able to understand. Right? So yes, we do have to highlight the functionalities of a product. What is it that we have brought in that remains a part of your advertisement and marketing strategies. But when we really talk about design of that particular product, it has to be made intuitive so that people do not require any training. The learning curve should be as minimal as possible for them.
But the infinite user experience is somehow telling the awareness of the features of the product. in for the very new product, which is not.
For very new products, yes, that is why we have onboardings. Like अगर आप देखो, user को train करने के लिए रहता है उसमें. But that's only again a few screens, not more than that. तो आप smart TV लेते हो, तो smart TV में भी वो बोलेगा अच्छा इस कोने में आप ये कर सकते हो, navigate ऐसे कर सकते हो. That is the basic training that these guys get. You know, so that manual has perhaps been made digital, but altogether the goal always is that let's create a product which is very intuitive for people to understand. वो रहेगा. And yes, we have to advertise the new features. Like look at Apple, the smallest things they do, they create a beautiful video out of, you know, you are seeing all those chips inside and what. I don't want to do anything with that, but that is an appeal that they're creating. The way they have strategized the whole thing. In fact, over the years, you see, they have created a framework for themselves that works best for them. Similarly, any other company would need to find out what works best for them. That way. And this really brings me, in fact, your question was, it's actually leading to another thing, right? When you say people should understand, now, who are these people? What are the levels to them? I mean, we definitely say users, right? But then they are of all different kinds. You have a primary user, who is the one who's operating the whole product, right? Or perhaps interacting with it day in and day out. You have secondary users who may occasionally sort of look at it. And then you have a tertiary user, maybe someone who's selling that product, who's creating that product. And they are all different forms of users. And this becomes my favorite slide. There is a huge difference between the clients and the user. So the user in this case is the baby. The client, maybe the secondary user, is the parents. And this is what the baby is seeing over. So we have to understand all these different sort of users, especially when you are saying that we want to take into consideration the company, the services, the whatever things these guys are providing. So looking at the primary users, what are their capabilities? And really, when you're talking about physical product design, these things will come into picture. The physiology of the user, certain cases, psychology.
Again, intervening over here a little, because yesterday we had a discussion around toys. Now, toys is a very, very interesting market to enter into. If you can create something for toys, that's, you know, you're entering into a gold mine. Given the present situation where the Union government has banned import of Chinese toys in the country, it makes it, you know, all the more sense to think of that. And we were talking about a bike or a bicycle which would not fall, bicycle for learners. We also talked about that game where a child would put on a ring in their foot and they would jump and something like that. So, in all these contexts, see, while Anmol is sharing something, or continuously think about your product. See, that was why yesterday's session came before today's session. Because आप अगर इन सबको बस hypothetical concepts और theory के तरह से देखोगे, then ये lecture तो हम कभी भी कर लेते. ये lecture इससे बेहतर lecture शायद आपको online मिल भी जाएंगे. That's not the point. The point is now in this setting, you should continuously, whatever Anmol is saying, continuously relate it to your product, your ideas. As to how does this apply to my thing? And जो भी आप बस चुपचाप absorb करते जा रहे हो या absorb करने की कोशिश कर रहे हो, उससे बेहतर है कि आप अनमोल को यहीं पे इंटरजेक्ट करो और बोलो कि लेकिन I have this product, this is what I think the users are, am I correct? That is the active processing that should happen in your minds now. When these concepts are getting introduced, let them not be just theoretical concepts for you. This is a workshop course. This is a workshop course. Everything is intended to make you apply this learning to some product, some project. You already have a product or a project idea in mind. You may not continue with it. You may change that. But हमने कल कितनी सारी चीजें डिस्कस करी, आपका नहीं भी था, किसी और का भी था. Pick it up, mentally experiment करो and बोलो कि क्या मैंने जो सोचा वो सही था. Check here and now. ताकि कल को जब आप अपने प्रोडक्ट के लिए करो, एक ग्रुप में बैठ के करो, तो आपके पास वो लर्निंग यूज करने का पूरा स्किल. Otherwise, this lecture we can finish off in half an hour and we can go. And you will struggle later. That's not the intent. The intent of us sitting in this form, otherwise, तो regular lecture तो खड़े होके हम बात कर रहे हैं. Us sitting in this form and then sharing this information is that you bring it into a discussion. We are not standing high up. We are sitting with you so that you feel comfortable to ask. But no one of you is asking anything. Think of each and every topic that is being discussed. अब इसी slide के अंदर मेरे को कल के जो ideas थे उसमें से 5 चीजें, 5 लोगों के ideas का matching दिख रहा है. There has to be some question you ask. You should be asking. Validating. Not a question, but a validation that you should be getting. So feel free to do that. Don't let us just go on at our own pace. Are you able to understand whatever has been told until now in context of your product? Are you able to do some mental experiments while Anmol is speaking? Do you want to use this time, this time where I have stopped him and I'm pushing you to validate anything that you have thought until now? Can we take 5 minutes on that? Let's do that. Each one of you, just if you want to introspect a little more, do that. 2 minutes रुक जाते हैं, but then validate whatever you have thought. If you've already thought, we can already start and validate.
We are thinking of creating a beer for children, especially problem children or people are not exercising anymore. So we create a game that would be beers, but children will make the game as such that it will attract the kid. Like the character would be animals, the points would be bananas. Usually, what I thought of in the long run is he as the different profile created on children to eat spinach. It created a different children started eating spinach more and more. So the avatar of the avatar of the choice will eat banana in the game. So in real life also they eat banana or whatever, and they excel also. So the question is not on the question is what I have thought of as a whole thing. So basically, what I have thought of is we'll have a gearbox in front of the children.
Right.
Right. And it will be connected to a screen. Everyone has a TV. It will be connected to a screen. And the problem is here. So basically, what I did, I created something like this before also. What I did was I created 2 gears, were on angles. And when the children jump, the sensor will of course measure our height it is, and the character will jump in exactly of that height. So if that is clear the obstacle, it will pass or then fall. So now we have to create a product. So we can't have just one game.
So I have more questions for you, in fact, rather than an answer, right? So from what I understand, this is a screen-based game being shown on a television. And then you want the child to play more and not be glued to the screen. What is the age group?
Age group is 3 to 9.
Exactly, right? Right. So see, even doctors recommend that. I have a small daughter and my doctor keeps on saying that keep her away from screens, at least till the age of 5 or 6. Because that is detrimental cognitive. That is one reason. I mean, we now see that yes, phones or screens are sort of inevitable part, but really to create a playful game, do you really want again a screen to be there? That is something that you have to find out. But nonetheless, since you have spoken about this part, what I will do is I will show you certain things which are very interesting. And you guys are EC students, right? So you have to find out ways in which you can engage students without the screen as well. Okay. I'm not proposing a solution, honestly. Maybe the screen-based solution that you may come with may be the best. But I'm just putting forth some questions in front of you. Why should there be a screen when you're talking about small children? When the whole idea is to keep them away from these devices altogether. Secondly, look at certain things like बचपन में मैं Popeye के cartoons देखता था. Popeye used to eat spinach. Very favorite cartoon, but that never motivated me to eat spinach. Fine. That was one way that these cartoons had created. Some children did eat spinach that way. So yes, you are right on that aspect. How do we showcase these artifacts so that children are attracted to it and then walk around? But I would really ask you to first see what is the age group that you're targeting. If it is a very small age group, 3 to 5, then maybe things are very different. Fine. Put forth some question that what type of activities do you want these kids to perform? What do you say is a good physical activity? Physical game, like you want them to play out or use their bodily movements more and more. So what are the best games for that? Or what it is that you may sort of create those activities? Start thinking on those lines. What senses will it engage? Right? Is it just touch, audio, smell? What is it that you are trying to create? Multisensory. Because if you really look at children, playing is the way these guys develop, not by sitting sedentary and looking at screens. So perhaps you will need to go back into child development psychology. Look into that. So with the first point I mentioned, that design sort of becomes an interdisciplinary thing. We do have, in fact, one of the examples I can give you. I started my PhD, I went to a design department. I have an MTech in electronics and communication. So the first task that I was given was to create something for children because we were working with this in like Ankara Foundation in Bangalore. They teach children about different things, alphabets and all. So my first reaction was like this. Let's create something interactive. We had recently got that Connect sensor and all those things in a lab, and let's create those things. So I was saying, no, go and look at these children in school. Read a bit about Piaget and child development psychology. And then I started reading back. In fact, don't you think? You all know Lego, right? It's a big company that deals with all products or most of these things with children. But they laid more emphasis on physicality of things rather than the digital aspects. Why? So certain things you will have to reflect on. You need to ask more questions that solutions that you are thinking, is it even a solution in the first place for the problem that you're trying to tackle? So firstly, what is the age group? What is it that you're targeting? From this slide, what might be the capabilities of these children? What is the height and all the different things you will need to account for, and then start creating something.
This is very, very interesting input, because what I was imagining was that abhi Nintendo jo hai, that handles or that has a target audience which is in the age group of say 13 and above.
Right.
Above, any above.
Any above.
And with what he was talking about, where people would put on an anklet or a bracelet and they would do some actions, and the character on the screen would do the same actions, would enhance the reach of the same games, Nintendo and other things, to a much wider audience. Because anyways, whatever we may say, कि बच्चों को screen से दूर रखो, ये रखो, वो रखो, given the environment that we are in and given the pervasiveness of screens everywhere, even schools using YouTube lectures and YouTube videos या play school में जाते हैं, वहाँ पे भी कुछ screen तो देख ही रहे हैं. So it might not be really possible to keep them away from screens? The screens are pervasive, they're going to be there. And one thought could be that, okay, now can I make the screen instead of just a dumb thing or a thing that would lead my child into a sedentary way of life, into something where they would also have some activity in their life.
Right.
Or the screen is there. क्योंकि बड़े लोग स्क्रीन देख रहे हैं, बच्चे को भी स्क्रीन देखना है, उसको लगता है कि मैं बड़ा हो गया जब मैंने स्क्रीन देखी तो आप उसको जितना मना करोगे स्क्रीन देखने से उतना वो और उत्सुक होगा कि मेरे को स्क्रीन दिखाओ. Instead, showing the screen, you simply say this is not age appropriate for you, this is more age appropriate. And in fact, you will realize that children will probably have more fun because with their kind of activities than watching news on the same. They don't want to watch. उनको वही बताओ कि नहीं चल मेरे को स्क्रीन पे तुम्हारी गेम चला. Where there is this Nintendo type thing, these gears that you're wearing, anklets and bracelets. And then when you're dancing, the character on the screen dances. When you're doing something, the character on the screen does something. And in that process, you're learning even dance, let us say. I'm thinking out loud. Learning dance also. He created a dinosaur game earlier, which was just jumping obstacles. But 4 devices, and you could do so much about hand and leg movements. You could teach them more motor skills.
Right.
And it can be an educational tool and not just a fun game. So look, what I'm taking it to is that there are 2 aspects of it. First, there's a problem that I want to create a game for my child. Another way could be I have a technology. How can I make it useful for a child?
Right.
So both ways could be design thinking.
Yeah, you're right. Because we have to account for all those different things, right? But again, like I said, when we take the age group, then we need to be careful. Because 3 to 5 is something which has been scientifically said that
Yes.
try to move it away
Away
from
from
that. You know? 6, 7 is something that
We'll get
is generally considered that it is fine for the children to, you know, consume that content, not by a thing, but that way. So, in fact, I have some of the kids. In fact, I was thinking whether I should bring them to class, but now since you guys did mention that you are working with children and other things,
few of them, not all.
a few of them. So, but we can perhaps have a small activity with that particular kid, you know, so that you can know what are the potentials of even your disciplines can do. There have been some really beautiful kids like Mickey kids and other things that at least I feel are amazing in that sense. Right? So I will show you some of those things. And yes, the point definitely is well taken because you are able to create better experiences with screens because it is both audio, visual, and motor. But again, I will put the same question. Or bring in certain aspects that how do you bring in more collaboration within children? How can more groups play? Because screens by nature sort of create a solitary confinement for children, right? So if you can break away from that, it's quite good. So yeah, so we have to look into all these aspects, right? But another aspect is also there, like even if you let's say create these games, the secondary user, that is the parents, what are their perceptions? Right? So how do you tell the good things about a product and other things like you were mentioned, right? How do we advertise this?
Like there are different types of people, primary, secondary, and tertiary. Like in this, the primary users are like children, and secondary are like parents. So we should focus on more on like if we focus on children, like for their interaction, engaging more, but sometimes it might be harmful. So like most to keep in mind, or for like another example would be like if we focus on disabled people, like their population is come. It might be like I don't get that much benefit in terms of like financially or that. But then there comes like the concept of inclusivity. So like how
Concept of
inclusivity. Yeah. So how do I decide a trade-off between like
you have to account for that in your user base only, right? So for example, right now I mentioned like parents are the secondary user, considering only that if children play, I'm only focusing on children in that way. But many a times it is parents and children both playing at them. So your devices can perhaps be something that children and parents are both playing. In that case, it becomes more inclusive by including parents. And the factor of accessibility or inclusivity really comes in when you start thinking about all these disabilities and other things that you want to account for. So again, you have to very clearly define your user base. What is the target group that you're focusing on? What are the activities that these guys will do? The context that these guys will use your product in. That has to be defined clearly. All in all.
Again, just the same idea, anklets or bracelets, right? And I'm thinking out loud and I'm thinking here the medical device here. For example, people who undergo therapy, physical therapy, sports injury recovery or things like that, they could be wearing these anklets. And instead of, because they at many places access to a doctor or a physiotherapist is not possible or very costly, very expensive. Then if you have an ecosystem or a system where you say that, okay, raise your hand by 15 centimeters. आपके हाथ पे चोट लगी थी, you're recovering from a fracture, raise your hand by 15 centimeters. Now that report goes to the doctor. He says, अच्छा अब आपका target 20 हो गया, अब आपका next time पे target 23 हो गया, 25. So in a way, the doctor just needs to do something on their screen, configure, and there they will be able to help you do some therapy at home just by wearing those anklets, right? And आप ठीक तरह से अपने हाथ को घुमा रहे हो, मतलब same technology, same product, but so many use cases, different use cases.
In fact, they can prototype these things, test it out in the scenario. But one very interesting point that often comes is because for a very long time, then at least I started doing all these design early activities, right? Most of the time I was like, I created the prototypes first because that is what I had in my mind. And then I was making an iteration later on by going to the fields. So maybe you start with children. Let's say if I just talk about your use case, that you have an idea, you prototype it first. And then you go back to the field and start testing it out. So what you notice is that perhaps these are the activities that may gel well with children, may not gel well with students. What are the learning outcomes that you're trying to achieve, etc., right? So the point I'm trying to say is that we need to be conscious enough so that whatever insights we get from the field studies, by observing users or by participating in their studies, we need to be able to convert them into working prototypes. Fine. It's not like idea, prototype, product. It never is that. Fine. You may have sort of gone in the field and noticed, yes, there is an issue. If I can use television screens perhaps to create games for children, some insights may have come from that. But you will have to go back again and again to that group till you refine it and get findings. And in fact, that is why the software versions are always updating. The hardware always becomes obsolete and the next thing comes in. Because we are continuously working towards improvement. So your product is never final. You have versions of your product. That is right. So yes, from the fields, from the studies or whatever you need to do, your need analysis, this one. How do you translate them into a working prototype? That becomes really important. And rather, how do you capture these needs? So this brings us to the whole point, needs. Users really know what is possible. And many times users don't know whether they want a product or not. So an example, like before iPhone came up with multi-finger gesture recognition on screen, people were using stylus. And no one thought that, yes, at least maybe people would have thought, but it never showed in any product. So I will just say that, yes. Apple then thought, let's introduce screens with your fingers as primary mode of interaction. So pehle kyun nahi bana? Many a times the needs are somewhat which are blurry for the user. In fact, we cannot always let the users take charge of the product. It is a user-centric design nonetheless, but the user is not designing the product. So always maintain that creative freedom to introduce a certain feature or to remove it. Right? As a designer, you will have to be conscious enough how to do that. Right? Not all users are able to understand what the needs are. Perhaps you have to be more um, receptive to that part. But what you can do is you can look at the existing things that these guys are doing, the activities that these users do, where they're doing this activity, with what group of people these activities are being done.
So, yeah. In one sense, then, the value that people place to user surveys to find out what features they have to put is overrated.
In one sense, yes.
Okay, we have to do those surveys to understand their needs. But you're absolutely right in sharing that users might not express those needs which they think are not feasible or possible to be fulfilled.
Right.
And therefore, you will not really get to know the breakthrough needs which can lead to breakthrough success for you through user surveys.
Yeah.
If you really want breakthrough success, you have to supplement those user surveys with more observation of their, as you write, their context, their way of working, and how they are handling various tasks. And be alert and conscious कि यार ये तो useless है, इसको क्यों ऐसा कर रहे हैं, इससे बेहतर क्यों नहीं कर पा रहे? You have to be the challenger there.
Yes. So we firstly have to challenge whatever we have designed, right? But there are whole things, right? Because if we get into qualitative data without user surveys, let's say, so we cannot quantify qualitative. So that does not lead to perhaps measurable outcomes. That is why surveys are done. In fact, most of the design methods, in fact, and when you're creating different products, you will see that we use both qualitative and quantitative measures. We speak with the users, and sometimes we also take surveys, just so that we are able to get a broader viewpoint what things are. So some things that are measurable, it becomes quantifiable, like quantitative or surveys-based things. So उस case में हम लोग surveys लेते हैं. But oftentimes the thing is that we may need to come up with things that are perhaps not there at all existing. Yeah.
इसमें ये finding होता है, हम बाहर हो जाते हैं अंदर थॉट से कि नहीं ये प्रोडक्ट तो सर्वर से ये प्रोडक्ट तो डिमांड में आना चाहिए. But
वही था कि वो एक तो engineers conceit है, but अब so there is no clear definition this way. क्योंकि there have been people working in the field which do not follow user-centered design, but they say कि how will the world look like 50, 100 years down the line?
Yes.
And then they create products. Fine. So yes, then we work backwards. अच्छा 100 साल बाद अगर चीज ऐसी है, तो how will the users be responding? Backcasting and everything, right? So you future cast and then you backcast. So we have taken things from n number of places, and then we say these are design methods, and that becomes one of the challenges for designers as to कैसे करना है. But I will not talk about that. So the point being that unless and until we understand the users well psychologically, what is or what our product cannot do, or how will the user respond to a particular stimuli? Whatever we are designing may not be the right one. It's not about the feature or functionality. User-centered design से हम कोई functionality लेके आए. Maybe you invented a functionality, right? But how will the user operate with that? How will the user communicate with that? That becomes important, right? So ये कुछ चीजें होती हैं. The limits of a human being. That's what we say, no? Psychologically and physically. अगर हम लोग उन चीजों के लिए, if we are aware of that, then we can design better products. How many buttons to keep, where to keep those buttons, which button to make red, बाकी buttons का color क्या करना है? If I only talk about buttons, are red. So these are all talking about human capabilities. ये अगर थोड़ी बहुत awareness लानी पड़ती है. With children, we need to think a lot with, their cognitive development, the way these guys sort of motor movements. There are different frameworks like multiple intelligences and all. So थोड़ी बहुत अगर हम psychology or cognitive science से भी inputs ले लेते हैं, so that helps a lot. In fact, many of you might be working on different products. So it's better that you look at the human side of it. And by human side, I mean psychology and cognitive science. Yeah.
For that part, we need to consult the psychologist.
No, you need not consult psychologists. I mean, you can refer to the studies that are already published. There is a huge body of work that has happened within design, product design, industrial design, जिसमें मतलब लोग क्या सोचते हैं, क्या perceive करते हैं चीजों को, क्या समझते हैं चीजों को देख के, वो सब already documented है. So we can only say कि we can follow those as practices. Psychologists ko perhaps we may need to consult for a very specialized product. Let's say if you are talking about children, we may need to go with some childcare expert in that case, or their teachers to be brought in. Like this one of these demos that I showed you, or a screenshot that I showed, virtual reality for public speaking anxiety. इस case में हम psychologists के साथ काम कर रहे हैं institute. We want to understand how whether they will invite this whole thing. So in certain cases, we have subject matter experts, which can be from different disciplines.
Integrating the people and then understanding the problem. The second is observation. So isn't it good like just based on the observation or rather discussing it with some expert and then creating a good time and then improving. Then basically putting it with the customer and then getting the feedback and then will it be a good process rather than interviewing, skipping the interviewing and just focusing on observation or discussing with the expert.
So this slide sort of answers what you were asking. Because it's not only the interviews and observations. We have many ways in which we can capture the whole thing. Now, subject matter experts are someone who has dealt with that thing for a very long time, has some experience in that. And users के पास हम इसलिए जा रहे हैं क्योंकि we want to understand deeply that what these guys are doing. If I place the product, so it is always a loop. You cannot divide it.
Users come to मतलब the feedback to element भी हो सकता है. मतलब उनको जैसा expect कर रहा है मतलब कुछ वो ऐसा चाह रहे हैं जो जरूरी नहीं है.
So don't implement that. See, हमेशा ये होता है कि you speak with 100 people, you get 100 opinions. Fine, but what are certain things that have been recurring in all these 100 feedbacks that you have taken? Perhaps that may be the need. So, वैसी टाइप की चीजें हमें देखनी होती हैं. So that is why we say involve users in your study, but do not let the user drive your product. Right? So you are the one designing the product. You have to have that creative freedom कि अच्छा.
मैं एक बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग एग्जांपल देता हूँ. कल ही ओपाइन फीडबैक आया. All you are on the users, you gave that feedback. कि भाई ये है, ये करो, ये करो. तो अब कोई कह रहा है कि जो फ्लिप क्लासरूम में बिल्कुल बेकार है. In that person's experience, that might be true. But remaining 80 people in the class are saying, oh, I really benefited from flip classroom. So if your sample size is very small and 3 people only and 2 say I like flip classroom, 1 says I do not like, then you might be confused, should I do flip classroom or not? But when your sample size is big, then this one person is an outlier. Or you cannot now change the class format because one person doesn't like it. So user feedback lena hai. But user feedback is not gospel truth. One person did not like it does not mean the world will not like it or the majority will not like it. So, हमेशा user feedback के लिए आपको careful रहना है कि are you using a wide enough sample space? Don't base your decisions on just 1 or 2 people saying something. So, ठीक है, इस course के context में you might only take 2 feedbacks. Ideally, you should launch a survey, work on the feedback, develop specification over a period of months, refine them over months, have a prototype ready based on one set of specifications, let the users play with it, work with it, and collect feedback again. And as he said, iterative. Observe how they are using the product. आपने जो features दिए, are they using it in the right way? Which of these features आपने 10 features दिए, आपने उनको 100 लोगों को दिया. अब जो पहला प्रोटोटाइप बना रहे हो उसके अंदर एक आपने लूप बना रखा है, एक कम्युनिकेशन मोड बना रखा है, that you will get a tickle or SMS or something that okay, this feature is being used, this feature is being used, this feature is being used. By the end of 2 months, 100 people using it, you will know that okay, 90% of users use this feature the most. So this feature has to be really perfect. Another 20% of the users use that feature also. So this second feature is the next most important. So this particular feature no one has used. Now it is not that you drop the feature. Now the question comes back to you. Did I design it in a way that users could use it in the first place? I thought this is a very important feature. People have not used it. Why? Just your stop button was next to the sports button. Have I put my button in a concealed place जहाँ पे user का ध्यान ही नहीं जा रहा उस पे? Yeah, is it in a place जहाँ पे user उसको समझ में ही नहीं पा रहा कि यहाँ ये बटन क्यों लगाया है? तो पता ही नहीं कि क्यों लगाया तो कैसे यूज करेगा? मैंने तो सोचा था बहुत यूजफुल होगा. So answer may not necessarily of anything. Observation में देखा कि ये feature यूज नहीं हो रहा. The answer is not just feature को drop कर दो. The answer is reevaluate. What happened? Why is anyone not using it? Is my implementation wrong? Is my interface wrong? Or is there some deficiency in the implementation itself कि user चाह तो रहा था, लेकिन ये पूरा काम कर ही नहीं रहा. तो ये फीचर यूजफुल तो है, लेकिन जब तक ये एडिशनल एक स्टेप और नहीं कर देता, तब तक यूजर इसको यूज नहीं करेंगे. So that is the importance of all these user needs, capturing user needs and feedback. User input is not gospel inputs. User input is only a pointer, an indication, a food for thought, which you have to eat and digest and synthesize and mull over to finally come up with a better product.
Underline this keyword, synthesis part, right? That is very important. The variations that you're able to bring in.
So, should the service become more important when the users are asked to choose options or when they are asked to give ratings? But when we try to like introduce new features and like something like that, then we should more focus on like the research-based studies and our freedom, like creating.
So you have to retain your creative freedom, that is there. But अगर आप primarily देखो, what is the purpose of these surveys? These surveys mainly measure the satisfaction of the users in some way or the other. या तो usability देख रहे होंगे products की, या तो satisfaction. They may ask you, and this is generally a polling, what functionalities do you use the most, right? So that is only to get feedbacks for the design process. What can be done and what cannot be done. So मेरे phone में मैंने आपको let's say कोई feature बना के दे दिया, then I take a survey. Are you satisfied with this feature? If many, let's say, I floated the form to some 100 people, and if I get a response mainly that they're not liking, then definitely people are not satisfied. So surveys, again, there are quantifiable means to measure something. मैंने एक product बनाया and it should satisfy my user, or at least different aspects of that product should be done right. Just to measure that quantifiably, I do it. But mainly it is a participatory project approach of designing products, wherein you go to the users, you understand what the needs are, and then come back again and again. But I will show you one of the case studies wherein that whole observation of people was not holding true, and that really went with the observation of a designer. But it was interesting, like some years back I saw a TED talk primarily by an architect. They were designing a university campus, but अक्सर आप देखते हो campuses में there are these footpaths that have been created or walkable उसके लिए, so that you can walk around. So what they observed was by that हमने हर campus में जहाँ पे भी बनाया है that people are not taking this path that we have made concrete. So the next they let it as it is. They did not create any paths, and the people were just going and following one shortest path. तो क्या होता है ना, घास पे बार-बार चलते चलते पगडंडियां आती है. अब आप लोग भी देखते होंगे. Luckily, I have not noticed anything here in IIITD as such. Maybe it has been very consciously designed that.
We have a campus यहाँ पे shortcuts है ही नहीं. There is only one way, which is a shortcut.
Right.
So we don't have that kind of a circular or big space.
अक्सर क्या रहता है ना कि गार्डन होगा और गार्डन के पास से इधर से साइड से फुटपाथ चला जाए. And people are taking routes via garden. तो बीच में एक लाइन बन जाती है जहाँ पे लोग. So उन्होंने क्या किया कि ऐसे ही ऑब्जर्व करते रहे उसको, और फिर घास पे एक पगडंडी बन गया, then they created a path over. Right, the shortest path. Now, this is when you're talking about volumes, like architectural spaces when you're dealing with. The user sometimes shows you the way, sometimes you have to find out. Maybe अगर आप लोगों से पूछते हैं जाके कि इधर रास्ता कहाँ पे बनाने, तो the thing is कि people are also trained psychologically. हर कैंपस में वो लोग जाते हैं, देखते हैं कि हाँ गार्डन के अक्रॉस रहता है, घास को नहीं डिस्टर्ब करना है. So the user might also say कि हाँ ऐसे बना दो आप, but by default they will be taking this route.
तो जरा लेट हो गए तो बीच से जाओगे, कौन सी साइड से जाएगा पूरा सर्कल काट के.
तो कुछ ऐसी चीजें होती हैं which are very interesting, and that really like is interesting. But nonetheless, there are different ways in which you can capture the needs of the people or to understand कि जो भी आप बना रहे हो कैसे अच्छा बना सकते हो. अलग-अलग तरीके, but this cycle remains: discover, explore, test, listen. You may come across this as, you know, define, empathize, and other things. Cycle remains the same, but with different terms.
This is very, very interesting, because what this means is that for each one of the products that you're thinking of, you have to have at least all these 4 steps taken care of in one way or the other. अगर आपने इनमें से किसी भी एक स्टेप को मिस कर दिया, and actually this is an iterative process.
This is an iterative process.
तो अगर आपने एक बार भी किसी भी स्टेप को नहीं करा, मतलब आपका प्रोडक्ट अच्छा यूजर एक्सेप्टेंस नहीं पाएगा, शायद तुक्के से पा लेगा, तुक्के से. But otherwise the risk is very high. If you want to have really a very good product, ensure that all these 4. Discover means what is it that the people need? Am I solving their needs? Am I using the right technologies to solve their needs? For example, अभी जो screen and children games की बात है, तो children के लिए वो screen is not the right technology, but हाँ 5 and above के लिए शायद ठीक है. तो what discovery? What is the discovery? What is the child's thinking process? जैसे वो जो इन्होंने मोबाइल का एग्जांपल दिया कि पेरेंट्स तो यहाँ से लटका हुआ देख रहे हैं, बच्चा नीचे देख रहा है, बच्चा उछल रहा है, कुछ हो रहा है. बच्चे को क्या दिख रहा है? बच्चे को बस उनके बम्स दिख रहे हैं, 4 कलर के बम्स, दैट्स इट, है ना. तो what is the, that is a discovery. ये चीज डिस्कवर करना. Then explore. What is it that, you know, अगर एक बच्चे का पर्सपेक्टिव ये है, तो बड़े का पर्सपेक्टिव क्या होगा? अगर यही मेरा एक ऐसा हाउस होल्ड है जहाँ पे there is a maid in the house, और बच्चे को घर से बाहर निकलना अलाउड ही नहीं, तो क्या होगा? अलग अलग तरह के यूज केसेस, सिनेरियो, दैट इज एक्सप्लोर, टेस्ट, एज ही सेड, मेक अ प्रोटोटाइप, लेट पीपल यूज इट. ये जो भी एग्जांपल दिया कि छोड़ दिया पूरा पार्ट, कोई कंप्लीट पकड़नी नहीं बनाई. हॉस्टल से बच्चे कॉलेज क्लासेस तक गए, आए गए, सब हुआ, जहां गए वहां के पगड़ियां अपने आप बन, उन्हीं पार्ट को कंक्रीटाइज कर दिया. तो टेस्ट in a way, you know, that could also be called as discovery. Which path do you need? That is also, so एक कहीं पे mix नहीं है.
There is a mix and match. मतलब altogether you can start with anywhere, but problem definition जो आपकी आती है, generally that is the first starting point. That has to be really clear. And if it is not clear, perhaps by creating things and going back again and again, then you will make it clear. So yes, these are some of them. जरूरी नहीं है ये सारे हर जगह थे. And many of these are qualitative and in fact derived from social sciences, like ethnography. लोगों के बीच में बैठ के उनको ऑब्जर्व करना, समझना कि क्या कर रहे हैं. Many times that how many of you have heard that TED talk? I'm forgetting the name of that again. In fact, computer in a wall.
कंप्यूटर जो HCL वाला जो उन्होंने एक्सपेरिमेंट करा था,
बच्चों के उसमें. So that was a very interesting thing, because you can say that.
Do you know about this?
Yeah. So what they did was that in a village, they installed a computer in the wild, and it had internet access, I think. And क्या हुआ ना कि they did not teach anyone how to operate that thing, but that computer was just kept over there, right? And eventually they observed that all these small children, they became very curious. And they started, you know, fiddling with that computer, and eventually becoming experts to a level that कोई भी information चाहिए होती, they would directly, you know, surf your internet, and started helping, in fact, the elderly in the village that way. So that was a very interesting study, the power of IT, of how it can mold things, right?
This computer in a wall, the system was such that एक्सेस जो है बहुत लिमिटेड था. कीबोर्ड अवेलेबल था और स्क्रीन अवेलेबल थी, बाकी कुछ भी चीज बच्चे ना टच कर सकते थे, ना कुछ और कर सकते. बच्चे क्या, कोई भी ना टच कर सकता था, ना यूज कर सकता था. एवरीथिंग वाज मेड इन सच अ वे दैट यूपीएस भी लगा है तो पीछे बैकग्राउंड में लगा है, मतलब इट वाज लाइक वॉल के पीछे लगा, किसी को कुछ नजर ही नहीं आ रहा था, उनके लिए जस्ट यहाँ पे एक बाबा बैठे, इनसे आके सवाल पूछो, बाबा जवाब देंगे, ठीक है, इट वाज समथिंग लाइक दैट। एंड the study was this was done by HCL, I think Shivnadar Foundation ने करा था, या Kiran Nadar Foundation, which are one of those two, HCL के founders में से किसी का स्टडी था। And they set up such computers on the wall at multiple places, and as Anmol mentioned, these were the findings. People, like, if your interface is intuitive, if your operating system in this system was intuitive, people were able to use it anyways. उनको कुछ ट्रेनिंग दी गया नहीं दिया गया, उनको बस एक्सेस दिया गया उस टेक्नोलॉजी का, and they made good use of it. Now they might not have used every feature of that computer because they were not aware, but at least digital unify, मतलब अगर हम कहें कि you know आज भी there are people who do not know anything about internet. There are people who do not, even if they know that there is something called internet, they have no clue about how to use it because they do not have a smartphone or a smart device. Forget about AI, मतलब AI को और आगे की बात. But we as technologists, we as engineers, we as scientists, you understand that without internet and without AI, we people will be completely jobless and we have to try, fag margins of society struggling for survival in just a few years' time. So we really need solutions to bring them in the mainstream, at least not remain at the margin. And this hole in the wall or computer in the wall was an experiment in that direction. मैं इतने सारों को train कैसे करूं? Can they self-train? And this experiment showed that yes, they can. So that was where it was.
So, if you really see, I mean, that can be an ethnographic experiment. You let something out. Ideally, there are different variations in which you can do these things, right? And sometimes you engage in all these different things. And the product design, you may find this is service to be done after design, so you may sort of take out. Contextual inquiry becomes important. Now, the word itself says context में जाके आपको inquiry कर रहे हो. So, one of some very interesting studies that I stumbled upon was about VMware. So VMware came out with virtualization, right? And they had these server stacks that were there for created. And it is often very time critical because when you're providing these services to different companies, especially, right? So you had this software interface which is very complex, primarily textual in nature. Or अक्सर क्या होता है ना, when I talk about users, people always think कि end user. So VMware में क्या हुआ ना कि they got this problem that we are facing challenge because there are being delays which are happening in our productions and the services that we are providing. So what can we do? Can we improve the user interface? So they hired an interaction designer for that. Now the interaction designer was sort of like let's go to the field and see what these guys are doing. So they surveyed the whole thing and then they spoke with the developers, which are, by the way, the main people handling most of the things that go on, to a text-based interface. And to their surprise, it was not the end users or the consumers that were the main users. The interaction design said it's actually the developer. ये बंदा है जो day in and day out बैठ के code कर रहा है, complex चीजों को देख रहा है. Fine. So they designed an interface by looking at what these complex operations that these guys do and created like a very elaborate interface, I would say, in that case. But that was only possible because they went to the field, they observed how each and every one was working. That was the contextual inquiry in that case. So oftentimes we tend to ignore who the main user is. And also understanding how primary need is key. So you go to their workplace, see how these guys are doing their work. So that is a form of, again, data collection, contextual inquiries. कुछ पूछना है इसमें?
There are still few of you who have not spoken a word.
नींद आ रही है? चलो ठीक है, let's do a very small activity before I jump into the next thing. ठीक है? ये classroom है. We all sit in this classroom. very dear classroom. I took class over here only in last semester. Right. So, what can be improved and what can go away? Think about it. Pen paper ले लो. Quickly start jotting it down. देखो, right? इस क्लास में क्या अच्छा है, क्या बुरा है, क्या improve हो सकता है, क्या नहीं. Yeah. Great.
This one is so there are, so you will notice that in triple IT, in every class, there are some chairs which are for left-handed people. आपने पता नहीं notice करा है नहीं करा? Are you a left-handed person? Also? No, that is why you will not notice. Those who use the left-handed
class, we took the economic class. वहाँ पर मैं गिने तो बैठी कोई left-handed है कोई भी.
Yeah, I guess in old academics, C1 like
C11 में तो कुछ होना चाहिए because the idea was that इधर वाली सीटों का यहाँ पे है टेबल जो उस साइड आयल के इस तरफ वाली सीटें हैं उनका टेबल इधर होगा. That was a thought process. नहीं है तो गलत है. Because this was the thought process with which the class was imagined. So those who are left-handed would want to sit on that aisle. Others would also, because majorly people are right-handed, so the majority of seats are like this, but few ones are like this. But good observation. This is empathy. क्या चीज?
Brightness अच्छी नहीं आ रही है. बिना light off के
Very good.
और
तुम्हारा टीचर को दिख नहीं रहा. टीचर को दिख नहीं रहा.
मेरे हिसाब से घड़ी उधर होनी चाहिए.
वही वो कह रहे हैं ना कि घड़ी उधर होनी चाहिए कि आपको दिखे और बच्चों का ध्यान वहां आ जाए कि अच्छा इतना बच गया ब्रेक तो मिलने वाली है.
when I get to that person to sit there, but that like my vision was blocked, so I came to front. So like for the people who are sitting in back, like maybe slightly blocked.
हल्का सा elevation.
हल्का सा elevation होना चाहिए.
But again, this is a very small classroom. But yes, one of those points.
Now you're users of this class. You should be able to find out कि क्या कमी है.
Many a times when I come to the class, I see all these wires. They are a hassle for me, honestly. कभी-कभी लगता है कि काश wirelessly connect हो जाए. But if you really see the sitting area and the bench is not support. I mean, some things I would say कि they are a part of service. Yeah, they were designed properly, but then there has to be some maintenance that goes on regularly. That is one problem. वो जो हर क्लास के बाहर लगा हुआ है. Occupied हो गया. Who uses that? I accidentally entered some classes. Some class चल रही थी, but it was always green. Class is not occupied. Maybe automate हो जाता है. और
like sometimes it's like a class with me and when you study and go.
Secret room में यार when I first came to this class, बड़ी खुफिया class है. Some secret operations are going to happen. Okay, so some small points that you can always make in your daily lives are there. What is good, what is bad, कौन सा design अच्छा है, कौन सा design bad है. Like even if there were chairs for left-handed people, are there emphasis enough or markations enough for these guys to understand कि हाँ ये left-handed thing है. It may not be evident for anyone, right? For everyone immediately. तो शायद इनका color भी कुछ अलग emphasis होता.
हाँ मतलब बहुत सही बात है कि चेयर का सीटिंग कलर ही चेंज कर दो, वो डिजाइन की तरह लगता है, या इसको इसका कलर चेंज कर दो, वो भी डिजाइन की तरह लगता है. क्योंकि पूरी क्लास में whites and there are few lines of reds and greens and blues and something like that.
I wonder why it's like different.
You're clearly right. कुछ चीजें तो ऐसे ही कर सकते हैं, faculty can do. In fact, when I was taking this course, design processes and perspectives, बहुत similar चीजें होती हैं, यही चीजें. So it never materialized though I really wanted to. I came up with this thing called design vandalism. Go out in the campus, see कि क्या क्या खराब है and improve that. I never materialized. I will try it again next semester. Let's see. But anyway, so
एटलीस्ट ऑब्जर्व करके रिकॉर्ड ही दे दो,
Record ही
ताकि
दे
कोई इसको ठीक कर दे अगर आप नहीं भी कर सकते तो एटलीस्ट
Right.
सर्वे ऑफ दिस पॉइंट काइंड कुड बी अ गुड असाइनमेंट.
yes,
इंटरेस्टिंग.
One of the questions. We are talking about good and bad aspect of the market of the system. So there is a purpose that so for a class, the purpose is that here the teaching has to happen properly. So keeping that in mind, you can define the parameters which are good and which are bad. But if you dilute that purpose and if we keep out in general, so for example, here we are sitting in the in here, this is one, so this is good. But outside somebody is there like giving stones. So very bad, that we have a bad experience. So with respect to the context, the purpose which we are talking, the good and bads has to be.
राइट. एक्चुअली इसलिए उधर शब्द ही लिखा है कॉन्टेक्सचुअल इंक्वायरी. इस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में आपको उस सेटिंग में ही देखना. जैसे अभी हम इस क्लास की बात करें, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इट फ्रॉम द पर्सपेक्टिव ऑफ स्टूडेंट्स एंड फैकल्टी, because these are the primary users. There could be someone who else also who may be a tertiary user or some other kind of a thing, but अभी तो यहाँ पे यही दो तरह के यूजर्स है, तो हम अभी इसी तरह के यूजर्स के पर्सपेक्टिव से बेसिस पे क्लास के इंप्रूवमेंट की बात करें. बट हाँ, हम किसी भी सेटिंग में जाएंगे तो उस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में क्या इंप्रूवमेंट्स हो सकती है, दैट थॉट शुड बी.
so like if you talk about only from the interiors perspective, अगर natural light आती है तो people are more comfortable and they imbibe more information, right? But वही है कि इसको कर दोगे तो this is not visible in that case. So measures have to be made designed that way. In fact, the color scheme can be more refreshing, more like dull environment भी रहेगा थोड़ा. Hopefully, we'll see more happy faces. Chalo, fine. Let's move on to the next bit. And mind you that this is an introduction to what design and how designers operate. Right? We go much deeper and deeper eventually, and let's see one thing. A very simple example of a product.
I would also want to use this break है, kind of break है, mental break है. We're not talking about subject, हम ऐसे ही जनरल आपको refresh करने की बात करें. See, we are in this course bringing in people and faculty and resource persons from a wide array of places. Okay? You have to feel free and you have to feel comfortable and you have to make yourself comfortable with approaching those people with specific questions and doubts outside the class also. All these faculty members will also be a part of the Google Classroom. So after Google Classroom का part बनेंगे. And all the members who are here as resource persons, including Rahul, Abhishek, Sana, and again, they will be a part and they will be available in the Google Classroom. So it is easy for you to access them. You can use the Google Classroom as a means to access them, the classroom stream there, or you could write email to them, whatever it is, but at every point of time, feel comfortable to reach out to them. क्योंकि अभी आप कुछ concepts समझ रहे हो, लेकिन आपके प्रोडक्ट में आज उस कॉन्सेप्ट को अप्लाई करने के लिए हो सकता है इमीडिएट ना हो. कल को जब आप करो, you might have doubts. Be assured that all the resource persons are committed and available. They might not be available 24/7. So ask, seek a time, seek an input, or use a platform like Google Classroom where आपने अपनी query डाली asynchronously, उनके पास message चला गया, they will then respond when they have. So feel comfortable in that aspect. While I want you to learn the most in the session itself, interact much more, validate your assumptions, cross-check your ideas, cross-check your understanding. While I want to do that, but I still understand that something might be left. And for that, don't hesitate to reach out to them later. सर आपने इस कॉन्सेप्ट की बात करी थी, वो वाली केस स्टडी बताई थी, क्या मेरे केस में भी ये एप्लीकेबल है? और just to review and validate, yeah, I've thought about it like this. Is it fine? Do I need to do something else? Do something more? So feel free to reach out to कल तरुण था, आलोक था, अनमोल है, if any one of us at any point.
अभी ना ये जो सेशन अभी थोड़ा बहुत खत्म हो गया, then I'll jump to your projects, whatever you guys are doing, and we'll have a discussion on that. So silent group जो है ना, I'll target you guys first. अच्छे से. Anyway, so moving on. आलू छिलने पे आते हैं. So OXO is one of the brands that they produce a lot of kitchen equipment. Very expensive to buy, at least in India, but bahar chalta hai. And they sort of created a potato peeler that made it into design museums. And case studies were made on this thing. हम लोग सोचेंगे कि यार ये आलू छीलने वाली तो ना सब किचन में करना है. What's the big deal about it? But the story goes is like that. One of the designers that was working for this company also, his wife was arthritic. She had trouble in peeling potatoes. At least he observed that. Traditional peelers देखे आप लोगों ने कैसे होते हैं? आप लोगों के घर में कैसे छीलते हैं? ये तो ठीक है. कैसा है वो, उसका मेरे को डिजाइन बताओ उसका.
Almost ऐसा ही है.
Almost ऐसे ही है. बीच में ब्लेड है. At least blade wise ऐसे ही है. Maybe the grip is different. और आजकल तो और अलग आ गया, तो रेजर ऐसे भी आ गया. Much better. I like that. Fine. So this is like years old, honestly. So क्या होता है ना, when a product comes to the market, then other companies say अरे ये बहुत अच्छा चल रहा है, so let's copy it. That happens. So to create this peeler, look at the iterations that these guys did. Only for the handle. Wow. These are prototyping, low fidelity prototyping. In fact, अगर मैं virtual reality के headsets की भी बात करूँ, तो I can show you thousands of prototypes such as these ones, even for wearables and other things, right? And prototype not necessarily always has to be a working. I will come to that later. So ये अलग-अलग variations हैं that these guys created. Now the observations sprouted if arthritic people or people who have trouble or some disabilities in their hand, they face trouble in peeling potatoes and vegetables. Right? Traditional peelers इतने पतले होते हैं कि they were not solving the problem. So the designer set out what will be the most optimal grip, which is comfortable and can work around the gun. Right? So as product designers, these guys spend a lot of time in their workshops and then they create all these things, right? Either manually or through foam or different materials that are there. So ये अलग-अलग material explorations किए गए, and then they came up with different sort of grips. Now the thing is, when you have created some 100 of ideas, how do you shortlist the best? In fact, this is a big problem. How do you find out the best ideas that you have? There are activities for that. We will delve into that eventually. But out of all these iterations that were created, certain set of peelers were shortlisted. अगर आप initial उसमें देखोगे, bicycle handle भी डाल दिया prototype. Okay. First prototype of pin shapes, because bicycle handle is somewhat resembling that. But it was interesting sub point when I was reading this case study was that. So what they did was they laid out all their ideas in front of, not all, but some selected few ideas in front of the people after shortlisting which ones can go and which ones cannot. And they asked the users to tell us what is the best grip you like. So they observed that many a times these people were sort of picking up one grip, but they were commenting that ये वाली grip अच्छी है. So they used to play with, let's say कि एक object है हाथ में उठा के they are playing with this thing, but they said कि यार मेरे को ये वाली ज़्यादा अच्छी लगी है. So the designer's observation was not on the users comment कि ये वाली grip ज़्यादा अच्छी है, but instead they said कि अगर ये इसको बार-बार उठा के सारे users they're playing with this. Maybe this is the one that they are liking, but unconsciously they're not able to convey that idea.
Visually शायद वो
visually तो
actually grip की term में यही better है.
यही better है. कोई भी आदमी बार-बार किसी object को उठा के बोलते हैं ये दूसरा वाला ज़्यादा अच्छा है. So subtle observations by designers, and thus came the excellent oxo-feeder, which had a very soft grip, a material that was comfortable to use. किसी भी हाथ के and किसी भी disability के पे it used to work. And this was a very interesting case study in that sense. How oftentimes the user's comments may not be the ones that are highlighting them. Okay. So defibrillator, again, if you are, and maybe if some of you guys eventually work in biomedical, biomed and other technologies, right? So these are equipments that oftentimes these companies focus on quite a lot. And defibrillator is something that provides shock, electrical shock, wherein you can get those pulses back. ऐसा छोटा सा कहाँ पे देखा है आप लोगों ने? किसी मूवी में देखा है? जेम्स बॉन्ड की मूवी में? कैसीनो रॉयल, जहर पिला दिया था उसको. That guy rushes to his car. Not a band, one movie fan. अरे वाह, surprising. Fine, but nonetheless, this is a typical example of how a UCD or user-centered design process goes ahead, and this is done by IDEO. So this is the definition of this device. It provides electrical shock to the heart, that it is able to bring them back to the normal rhythms. Fine. The problem statement being, when in an aeroplane there are elderly people flying, right? Oftentimes, if they get a heart attack, how can we provide, electrical shock to these guys, to this device, defibrillator? So what they did was they went out in the field and started observing abhi tak ambulances kaise carry karte. So these are some of the snapshots and observations. So typically carried by fire departments, and this is how these devices are kept. And look at the scale and the size of this device. Quite big, not something that you would like to carry on the aeroplane or something, right? Because the jagah ki kami rehti hai. So after making all these observations, how people operate, since how they are kept and transported, they started creating these field notes. So sketches ki inhone apne. You can doodle. I will not say become a Picasso. And sketches are primarily to convey ideas. Please note that. And it is a very important activity for ideation and to get things or observe, right? So you can create sketches of different contexts and scenarios. And similarly, that is what these guys did. They created the concept sketches and observation sketches from the notes. But what is more interesting is, look at these prototypes. These are cardboard se unhone chale. They did not create a work. They said if there is an optimal size that we can have, that can be carried easily. The cardboard ka inhone mock-up banaya, and then they work with different materials and eventually coming up with one of the variations of this prototype. And then utilizing some techniques like user enactment or experience prototype. इनमें क्या होता है कि आपने कुछ प्रोडक्ट आप सोच रहे हो कि आपके दिमाग में let's create this sense, right? But you know that the development and hardware will take a lot of time. So what we do is we rely on something called as low fidelity prototype. Prototypes can be divided in different aspects. Some are functional, some only show about the looks and feel, and which role बताते हैं. This case में इन्होंने क्या किया, device का बनाया, and then they started experience prototyping कि अगर इसको use करते तो कैसे होगा, and eventually creating the first mock-up of this is our device. A very small compact device, easy to use. First step, second step, third step. Anyone can use it. What you have to do is you just have to plug these things, electrodes inside your head. And then they did a mock-up, enactment scheme. Yes, में इसको heart attack नहीं है, but in a plain sort of a structure, they sort of did this enactment and created an open prototype. And then eventually getting into a successful product. Defibrillator, they condensed into a very small machine. Again, analysis, ideation, and then evaluation. Again, it was a data side. yeah, these are some of the aspects that we do as designers, some of the activities that we engage in. और ये सारी चीजें जो है आपकी डिजाइन थिंकिंग के पार्ट में इस बारे में होगी यूजर्स के बारे में हमें अच्छे से समझना है क्या क्या नीड्स हैं हम कहाँ पे ये चीजें हो रही हैं सब जानना है दैट इज व्हाई वी सॉर्ट ऑफ dwell into different methods ये जो स्लाइड थी ना उसके यहाँ पे अलग अलग चीजें दिखाई ये और है बहुत सारी चीजें होती हैं I mean there is a process there are methods methodology different things but for the time being let's just talk about methods the way you are able to identify needs for your products yeah done just asking everyone to stand for me honestly we have been sitting for quite a long time stretch out a little bit and I think it's best if we stand and talk. So, in fact, when we talk about brainstorming, ideation, and other things, right, I will cover those aspects tomorrow. So, there are something called as brain walking. Yeah, better, we do not ideate. Many times it is a tendency that let's just sit and sketch out, but it's always better to have things and move around and then complicate your everything. Yeah. So, any questions, any doubts?
So for products where the market is very cluttered, can the design aspect make a difference? Because let's say I was thinking of a smart meter, smart electric meter, IoT. But the problem is that there is no variation that I can put in it, which already doesn't exist. So all the variations of it are already in. So can the design aspect change the like do anything?
Design aspect has been changing and by design, like do not take it as advertising or something. I mean that is just one aspect of it. But अगर आप देखोगे like smart meters आपके लिए for feeding electricity and consumption of all this. How user friendly are they? पहले तब सांगी problem we needed an electrician from the department. Not everyone could read what is happening. Now they have sort of simplified the whole thing. In that sense, from user friendly perspective, that is one. But अगर आप IoT का perspective लाते हो उसमें and you are able to bring in some new features that are not existing in the current market. Yes, definitely you can make out that confidence.
Because all the variations are existing. So how can I make my product need based just on this?
I mean, one aspect that you can bring in the user friendly aspects. So अगर सारी variations हैं, definitely you look at the way you are looking at market side.
I think still a person has to come to read the ratings, right? So maybe that not to read.
Yeah, smart meters are considered meters.
So power line communication के through the reading can actually directly go to the distribution company.
Currently now all of those things.
Those are already handled.
So create a system in the sense कि आपके सिर्फ product ही नहीं है कि आपको ये भी देखना है कि the electricity department comes into play, the end users are coming into play, right? तो अगर आपका system उस चीज को bridge कर रहा हो, that can very well act as a design. और अगर सारे products similar हैं, तो I would seriously ask you to reconsider your positions. या किस तरीके से what sense are you saying कि ये सही है कि आप ये novel है या नहीं? कि अगर आप कोई भी product बनाते हो, you have to do a competitor analysis and find out कि where your product has an edge over the others. तो अगर उसमें सब में यही है तो फिर you're not able to capture the market. Perhaps you look at
Then moving to a different model with the better sense in that case. Like to different areas.
I mean, if it is a very early stage thing, then you have that freedom. But if it is somewhere down the line, one product आपने बनाई थी, then you have to innovate.
सी जो कल डिस्कशन हो रहा था इसी टॉपिक पे, उस पे ये था कि अगर आपके पास टेक्नोलॉजी है, अगर आपने ऐसा कुछ बनाया हुआ है, instead of targeting that smart energy meter that the discoms will usually supply, target those micro energy meters which can tell you what is the consumption of your AC, specifically your AC or AC in a particular room, or the television or some devices which you are interested in, so that the usage can be optimized and you can reduce your bills and things like that. So that could be a thought, but I'm not sure what kind of clutter is there in that market, because there then the ecosystem would matter quite a bit. See, जो energy meter, regular energy meter है, उसके अंदर users are discoms and discoms employees. I as a user or he as a user or even you as a user do not have a choice कि मेरे को ये वाला energy meter चाहिए कि वो वाला चाहिए. It is a B2B transaction. But when you make it a B2C transaction, then the design aspects can have a much stronger influence, where you could say that, okay, because of a better design, because of a better app, because of a better dashboard that you are able to show, someone would want to choose your product over another product at similar cost or similar functionality. So there, because about the users का type varied हो गया, there you could target it something like that. But when you're looking at only the energy meter that a discoms guy is going to use, it might be a little tricky, because even that guy doesn't have a say in which meter to choose. The choice is with the discom, and the choice over there is exactly about how many dollars or how many pennies you have to pay for that, getting that meter. Things like that.
And also you're saying you have surveyed all the existing meters, and all meters have similar features, whatever you are planning. Reload. That is what I can say. What was your order?
Basically, my product is like the all band, which like I just want to like very ज़्यादा था कि एक band बनाऊँ जो हमारे सेंसर से हमारे विद्युत वगैरह जो भी चीजें वो सेंस करे, और मैं उसमें AI अंदर मॉडल लगाऊं जो हमें आने वाले 24 आवर में ये बता सके कि वो आज का वो बंदा मतलब कि वो उसके क्लोज है कि नहीं. So that one basically ये था प्रोडक्ट में कि मैं एक मॉडल लगाऊं अंदर का, चीजें मैं सेंसर से भी डेटा दूं और उस मॉडल को उस पर लगाऊं ताकि फाइंड करके कि हार्ट अटैक आने वाला नहीं है.
Very interesting. Sometimes 2 days back, in fact, I read this news article. It mentioned that the Apple Watch actually prevented a death of a person or ill happening, because that device was able to detect that this person might get a stroke. Right. So my question being, when existing products are able to do that, but it was able to predict कि हाँ इनका जो heart मतलब he may get a heart attack.
CPP का hardware से बता सकते हैं, like I'm much broader like क्योंकि मैं ऐप बनाऊँ जिसमें आप अपने सारी चीजें से कोलेस्ट्रॉल लेवल वगैरह ये सारी चीजें आप उसमें डालो, तो आपका पीरियड का मेजर करें कैसा वो सबको डेटा को लेके और फिर प्रिडिक्ट करता है कि हाँ इसके पास है, क्योंकि जनरली वो पीक रेट हमारा दिख रहा है, हम स्पोर्ट्स खेल रहे हैं जहाँ पे हमारा हार्ट रेट बढ़ेगा, उससे वो बताएगा कि हाँ चलो इसको अभी भी इसका हार्ट रेट बढ़ चुका है तो मेरी का हार्ट अटैक. तो वो चीजें अगर वो बंदा जिसको बंदे को कोलेस्ट्रॉल काफी ज्यादा होगा और वो हल्की सी भी चीजें मतलब कि स्पोर्ट्स खेलेगा वो भी हैज अ मच हायर चांस ऑफ गेटिंग हार्ट अटैक एज कंपेयर टू दैट पर्सन. तो ये सारी चीजें.
See, Anmol's question is that if Apple already has that, Apple Watch already has that prediction functionality embedded in it, what is it that you are bringing on the table for which someone would want to choose your band? And it could be cost. It could be cost, it could be anything else. But you have to think about it. Any product that you want to work on, always look at the competition. Always do a competitive benchmarking कि और कौन है इस field में, who I will be competing with. They might not be giving all the functionality that I want to give, but then you should clearly know that this is the additional functionality for which what is the premium I am going to charge. Or is it enough to capture the market share even if I'm not charging extra premium? I'm selling it at the same price as another. Will someone still choose me? I'm a new name. That's an established player in the market.
So you have to think on all those terms when you want to design a product specification.
And again, what was the need for you to come with this idea in the first place?
Basically, generally, आजकल के जिस हिसाब से हमारा environment ecosystem चल रहा है, hard diseases are for everyone, sugar are common for everyone, so they are more likely getting this kind of thing. क्योंकि आजकल हर एक न्यूज़ में देखो कि एक अभी recent न्यूज़ आया था कि एक सोल्जर नाचते they got a heart attack and died at that time. So that's the reason behind. Basically, और मैंने ये ML प्रोजेक्ट काम किया हुआ है जो कि कार्डियक आर्टरीज को प्रेडिक्ट कर सकता है, this is what data science. That's why I didn't really
Strengthen your research aspect a little bit more in that sense and do a complete survey of existing competitors that are there. It may be hardware or software, either way, right? And then see where you are finding an edge. So that becomes an important aspect. Because it is not just a product that you're also trying to create a business out of it. So you need to be aware of all the competition that is out there in the first place, right?
I have a question from sorry. So we can cost be a significant aspect of launching the new.
Yes.
I need your opinion because I have not heard much about this as a very value addition.
Cost is definitely a big
Cost. So there are few high-level needs every user has: cost, convenience, efficiency or productivity, sustainability. So इस तरह के कुछ top level needs हैं जो हर user की होती हैं. तो अगर आप sustainability के नाम से भी कहते हो कि this product is much more sustainable than alternatives in the market, and it's at the same price, or even if it has a little extra cost, people would want to go that way. So बहुत सारी चीजें हैं. Cost is definitely very, very key.
costing की analysis भी होती है कि how do you price your products.
That people do work on costing thing, it is much appreciated, but on top of things you have built. But maybe
So
it is
again,
my
why-
experience, I have not heard much about playing with the cost.
It'll really depend also, right? Because again, I would say ki, what user base are you targeting? Is that user base even, willing to or thinking about paying that cost? So there are certain, like Apple simply targets like high-end customers. I mean, at least to a certain extent, that was the perception. Up to change ho gaya, ki ab sabke haath mein hai. But that was the whole thing. If you can afford my device, you buy it. Otherwise, no. So they had a pricey thing. Still is. So we really need to decide कि हाँ किसको ये service देना चाहते हैं and what is the base group that I'm targeting. क्योंकि उसके basis पर ही the whole business model, the costing, everything will rotate around that. At least eventually, initially.
So for example, Apple has made something, now this guy wants to make another thing. Now everybody cannot afford Apple, for example, and he is bringing something at a cheaper cost. So should he go forward or he should bring the novelty? That was your question. What are you bringing on top of it? So is the cost only can be appreciated or no? You will have to have some.
I will not say कि the cost is the only main factor. People do not just buy things because of the cost or just because it's looking beautiful or something.
Yeah,
It has to add some value in their lives, right? So अगर वो चीज उनको visible होती है आसानी से, then yes, these guys will.
So एक चीज का जब भी हम कॉस्ट पे प्ले करते हैं ना, एक चीज का हमें हमेशा ध्यान रखना चाहिए that if we play only on cost, then someone who can recreate or reproduce your product at a much larger scale will at once have a better cost advantage than you. Then you will be out of market.
Yeah.
So cost is definitely a very, very key differentiator, but that cannot be the only differentiator. Or that can be the only differentiator if you're like Reliance. You have very deep pockets, you can bear losses for 3 years, 4 years, and तब तक सारे बाकी players will dwindle away, and then you increase the cost. Then you make profits. Either you have to be like that, very deep pockets, let others vanish, then you play. But खाली cost के basis पे typically products नहीं चलते.
Products need to add value to users. Like when you talk about design, the sense में बस products यही आते हैं कि what good will it do when it goes inside the lives of people? What sort of factors, and this is one business aspect that we're talking about, marketing and business aspects. That has to be taken into account. But cost is not the only factor. Just because marketing, which is 100 rupees ki aur 50 rupees मिले, may not go. In fact, आप 50 में बेचो, कई लोगों का perception ये ना आ जाए कि कम बेच रहे हैं.
perception area पे quality खराब होगा, चलेगा.
So I will give you an example. When we were starting the international students program at IIT Delhi, so we have the DASA students, but we wanted to have more diversity on campus or more international students on campus. So हमने कहा DASA वाले जो हैं वो $4,000 per semester या per year की फी देते हैं, वही फीस हम यहाँ रख देते हैं. And we approached other people again, kind of this survey. This is what we are thinking. Are we thinking in the right direction, or do we need to change? And then this very valuable input came that see DASA की जो फीस है वो उस तरह से लिमिट करी गई है because government wants to do something. Government का mandate है कि उसको इतने पे देना है. आप खाली उसकी फीस को देख के मत डिसाइड करो कि आपकी फीस क्या होनी चाहिए स्टूडेंट पे. आप देखो कि आपका कंपटीशन किससे है. मैंने कहा किससे है? मैंने कहा ओके आप IIT दिल्ली हो, आपका कंपटीशन आप कह सकते हो IIT से है, बट IIT के पास DASA के अलावा कोई और रूट नहीं है, तो आगे कुछ फायदा नहीं हुआ. आप ये कह सकते हो कि आपका कंपटीशन किस ओर से है, VIT, शारदा, बिट्स पिलानी, इन यूनिवर्सिटी से है जो अलग तरीकों से DASA के अलावा अलग तरीकों से इंटरनेशनल स्टूडेंट्स को कैप्चर करते हैं. ना मैंने सुना शारदा, शारदा क्यों कह रहे हो? तो शारदा भी तो है ना. The number of international students that you have on the Sharda campus is many times more than the number you will find on IIT campus. तुम चाहे अपने आप को उस लीग में मानते हो, बट देखो शारदा क्या चार्ज कर रहा है. तो अगर आप शारदा जितना भी नहीं चार्ज कर रहे हो, तो लोग कहेंगे आप शारदा से भी बुरे. That is the perception they will get. So you should charge according to the perception people have of your competing institutes. When we saw, what is BITS Pilani charging? What is IIT Hyderabad charging? What is IIT Bangalore charging? These are private colleges. And then we pegged our fee according to that, which was much higher than $4,000. And then we said, see, our objective of international office is not to make money. Ours is to bring in more diversity, more exposure to our students to diverse perspectives. कोई बांग्लादेश से आया, कोई नेपाल से आया, कोई अंगोला से आया. आप सबकी क्लास में शायद एक या दो बच्चे होंगे जो किसी और कंट्री से आए. The intent was to have more of such interactions so that you get to know about more cultures, more perspectives, and therefore think creatively. And therefore we said, अच्छा, now fees ये है, लेकिन हम scholarship देंगे. So that effective fees is lower. But perception build करने के लिए हमने ये cost. तो आप देखोगे कि Amazon पे आप कोई प्रोडक्ट खरीदने जाओ, 60% डिस्काउंट के बाद सिमिलर प्राइस में मिल रहा है जहां पे दूसरा प्रोडक्ट है, लेकिन प्राइमरी कॉस्ट वो है. MRP वो रखा ताकि परसेप्शन वो रहे कि हाँ ये डिस्काउंट के बाद मुझे मिल रहा है. एंड मेनी टाइम्स दैट डिस्काउंट गोज अवे, बाकी आपको खरीदना पड़े उस हाई कॉस्ट, ताकि ये ना हो कि बस वो नोशनल कॉस्ट है. For us, for example, many students do not get any scholarships, so they pay the full fee. But many get. They are paying the lower fee. We have a method of identifying how much scholarship to which student. Amazon doesn't do that. वो तो blanket discounts देता है, but they could give user loyalty discounts. कि आपने पहले लिया था तो आपको 10% extra discount. So pricing, costing, pricing is a completely different thing. Pricing, और अगर आप खाली pricing पे play करोगे, there could be issues. खाली pricing is not the thing or the way to capture market share. There has to be something else also, more convenience, more comfort, more availability, better service, better repairability. Something else should also figure in. Then pricing is additional. खाली pricing cannot be. अब तुम कहो कि मैंने एक तो घड़ी पहनी है, मैं उसके साथ एक और बैंड पहनूं. That is not convenient. कितना भद्दा लगेगा ना दो बैंड पहन. तो जो ही मैं बना रहा हूं, that band should also have time, ताकि घड़ी के साथ ना करना पड़े. That replaces the watch. Then you are competing with all the other watch brands, not just So अभी बहुत लोगों ने अपने प्रोजेक्ट्स के बारे में चू भी नहीं करा.
Like I was make a product like that would be attached on cycle. से हम एंगल मेजर करते रहेंगे कि एंगल के सेगमेंट में then driver negotiate the like curvature path. In that case, they will indicate by buzzer by giving the buzzer like they are going to fall. But after discussion in the studies class, there was some fault like जब तक वो बजट बीट करेगा तब तक जो राइडर होगा वो गिर चुका होगा या गिर चुका था. So I'm requesting Mr. to like I'm switching to some other items. Like suppose we are riding in a car. Suppose in a remote area. Suppose there is accident happening. तो उस केस में एम्बुलेंस आने में काफी टाइम लग जाता है. So in that case, I will make a device that will be attached within a car that in case it collide with some body or rotate the car. In that case, acceleration will change. Like that will trigger on the server with location, timestamp, and with the date. And while nearby that location, it will be informed to all the hospital and I'm thinking to switch.
So what you're saying is you want to work on a product, develop a product which would do the 911 calling or the SOS calling as soon as there is an accident or an event that you define the event to. Interesting.
Short time like season 1 में आया फिर 2 में आया. ऐसा like कुछ idea तो वो 2 मिनट के अंदर like nearest hospital को contact करो.
Check करो.
Apple के फोन में भी नहीं.
नहीं, so see, इस चीज के लिए सारी के सारी टेक्नोलॉजी अवेलेबल है. फॉर एग्जांपल इमीडिएट ब्रेकिंग में आपके जो एयर बैग्स हैं वो डिफ्लेट होते हैं, है ना. एकदम से वो एयर बैग्स डिप्लॉय हो जाते हैं. तो इसका मतलब आई हैव द टेक्नोलॉजी टू अंडरस्टैंड कि कितना कि एक्सेलरेशन कब एक वैल्यू थ्रेशोल्ड से बढ़ा, क्योंकि मैं उसके बेसिस पे ऑलरेडी कुछ एक्शन कर रहा हूँ. ठीक है. कार टर्निंग टर्नर इज अ वेरी सिंपल थिंग. वो फंक्शनैलिटी तो आप अपने फोन में रखते हो. कितने फोन में आपका है ना कि मैंने उस फोन को उल्टा करके रखा, जो भी कॉल आ रही थी अपने आप साइलेंट में चली गई. तो the technology is all there. It is more about bringing it together into a product which is easily usable in any vehicle. Why just a car? Why not a bike? Why not a bicycle? Why not anywhere? It might not be my car. It might be, I might be sitting in the back seat. मैं उबर में जा रहा हूँ, उबर ने नहीं लगाया हुआ वो, लेकिन मेरे को तो चाहिए ना वो सेफ्टी. मेरे को तो एम्बुलेंस को फिर भी बुलाना है. तो इट कुड बी समथिंग दैट कुड बी पोर्टेबल विद द यूजर आल्सो. आई एम आस्किंग यू टू थिंक बिग and then say कि हाँ, does it make sense or no? It will completely change the form of your product. अभी पहले तो डिस्कवर करो क्या यूज केस है. आइडिया अच्छा है, टेक्नोलॉजी अवेलेबल है. See what we are trying to do over here is reverse function oriented search. हमें फंक्शनैलिटी पता है, हम क्या चाह रहे हैं, हम ढूंढ रहे हैं कि इसकी एप्लीकेशन कहाँ है, which is fine. See, function oriented search and reverse function oriented search, as we discussed in CIIPS also, are some of the most powerful methods of innovation. सही डायरेक्शन में जा रहे हो, but then do it systematically and correctly. मतलब expand करो तो कि और कहाँ पे यही functionality require हो सकती है, या कहाँ पे और use cases हैं. And then when you design a product, उसका जो reach होगा, जो उसका applicability होगा, वो much wider होगा. जैसे अभी हम पहले खाली गेम की टर्म्स में बात कर रहे थे, वो भी खाली जंपिंग गेम की बात कर रहे थे, लेकिन अभी बात करते करते मुझे अच्छा क्यों एंकलेट्स क्यों नहीं. एंकलेट्स हैं तो ब्रेसलेट्स क्यों नहीं. दोनों रखो, डांस भी सिखाओ, फिजियोथेरेपी भी करवाओ, कितना कुछ और कर सकते हो. टेक्नोलॉजी फर्क है नहीं, बिल्कुल सेम टेक्नोलॉजी है. सेम टेक्नोलॉजी बट सो मेनी अदर यूज केसेस कैन बी ब्रॉट अप इन द सेम डिवाइस. इट्स अबाउट एप्लीकेशन. एक्सप्लोर, मतलब वो सोचना पड़ेगा. दैट इज व्हाट दिस फर्स्ट वीक इज अबाउट. ऑल ऑफ दैट. Think, brainstorm, talk to your team members. Team बनाया अभी तक आप लोगों? अभी भी अकेले
Connecting future.
Okay. So team forming, brainstorming on ideas. The first week is about that. That is why, introductory concepts. कल वाला सेशन था, आज वाला सेशन है, कल वाला सेशन तो होगा. तो पहले हफ्ते के जितने चीजें हैं, they are all to trigger you to think in different dimensions of design, of user experience, of hardware. जैसे कल हम जब बात कर रहे थे कि तुमने कहा कि बूमरैंग शेप का कुछ लगाऊंगा, तो तुम पीछे क्यों मोटा होना है? एक्चुअली तो यहाँ पे कुछ चाहिए जो हवा को वो करे. So think about all those aspects in the first week, ताकि आप फिर next week onward उसके कुछ POCs, proof of concepts, then subsequently उसके prototypes, चाहे वो body के terms में prototyping है, चाहे वो hardware electronics के terms में prototyping है, ताकि आप उन phases में बढ़ सको. नहीं तो within this 8 weeks, how will you manage? And अगर आपको ये लग रहा है कि ये कोर्स खाली इस क्लास तक रहना है, सीमित रहना है, then you are mistaken. कोर्स डिस्क्रिप्शन में भी लिखा है कि फर्स्ट वीक में भी you should be putting at least 20 to 25 hours of effort. You don't realize that lectures उतना टाइम नहीं ले रहे हैं अभी आपका. बाकी टाइम आपको अपनी तरफ से लगाना है to get all these things in place. So
gaming market like Mario type something here, but like instead of like using keyboard and like gaming console, I want to like make them jump, but like I want to make it screenless type something. So I'm still in an editing process. So that was my idea. Existing usually marketing side, but like basically something screen paint any like type.
This point was right that you cannot do away with this thing. It really depends on the target input and promoter. The children we need to be very specific to that. एक बार existing चीजों को देखो. You can look into something called as projection mapping. Natural user interfaces में like gestures and all connect या depth sensors कुछ वो होता है काफी. Playful learning and above all you can look at this discipline called child-computer interaction. That is a very interesting area जहाँ पे बस बच्चों के लिए ही we create things. So you can definitely do a reading in that. Right? But all in all of you can actually क्या कर सकते हो ना कि अपना problem statement लिखो एक बार. Try to write it down till the point you are satisfied it is conveying what it is that you're trying to find and address. Fine. क्योंकि जब तक problem statement नहीं defined होगा, it may become difficult. अभी आप लोग क्या है ना, again like I said, we are thinking like engineers. When I go to a designer, they say कि problem क्या है, you know. So it's like one of my friends in college in design, and he went to his professor कि sir मैं ये करूँगा, ये है. He was doing his master's thesis project. Like अच्छा सब पता है तुम्हें क्या करना है? हाँ सर ये करना है. फिर रिसर्च करने की जरूरत क्या है? When you already know the solution, then what is the point? You are biased that way. Right? We do research. जब मैं बोलता हूँ आप competitive analysis करो एक बार, read the existing things, find out about things. क्योंकि we want to really find out whether that gap exists or not. If the solution is there, it's preconceived in my mind, then there is no necessity for doing the groundwork, right? हमें तो पता है कि in which direction we want to go ahead. So yes, do a bit of your research and crystallize your problem statements. उनको अच्छे से jot down करो. Try to write it down in sentences that define कि हाँ ये हो रहा है. So initially you can do that and try to identify your user base first. What is it that your product will do? कौन लोग use करेंगे?
So मैं target कर रहा हूँ like 3 or 4 to like 8-9 years. जैसे मैंने एक कोर्स में रॉक पेपर सीजर गेम बनाया था. वो like मैंने स्क्रीन का था. Like आप अकेले भी खेल सकते हो. Other people will be like that with the help of Arduino. So like but वो था कि वो बहुत basic हो जाएगा and like children might get bored easily by playing few times. So like उसमें like add कर सकते हैं कुछ तो like कुछ.
Look into it. Engagement strategy बच्चों के साथ कैसे रहेंगे. But I would say कि existing toys or games को देखो. Generally they start with 3+ years only. दो साल के लिए ज़्यादा कुछ रहता नहीं. So 3 or 4 years plus, then start looking into that. Toys. Toys is a very interesting market. In fact, it's very interesting to be captured. देखो उनको. ठीक है. Very surprisingly, like this time I floated a BTP. जो इसी पे था, child computer interaction for toddlers, creating interactive stuff and also something it's sort of aligning with these guys.
बेसिकली मैं साइन मतलब मेरा साइन लैंग्वेज का मैं जो चीज थी इसलिए मैं डेटा सेट्स देख रहा था और तो इसलिए देखा कि इंग्लिश लैंग्वेज भी बहुत सारे एक अमेरिकन साइन लैंग्वेज है मतलब काफी वाइड है और लेट्स से मैंने एक चीज देखी थी कि साइन कुछ साइन लैंग्वेजेस मूविंग मोशन ये होता है बेसिकली तो जो मॉडल है वो तो कभी स्नैपशॉट्स लेता है और फिर स्टडी करता है राइट बट कुछ होते हैं जैसे लेट्स से थैंक यू बोल रहे हैं तो भी यूं पूरा मोशन करते हैं एंड देन इट इज द साइन ऑफ थैंक यू सो तो बेसिकली मतलब इसमें अब मेरी मैं सोच रहा था कि ये तो अब अगर मैं ऐसी कोई चीज बनाऊंगा तो जो साइन लैंग्वेज कर रहा है वो रिस्ट्रिक्ट हो जाएगा क्योंकि उसे वही साइंस करने पड़ेंगे जो मेरा मॉडल समझ सकता है so this was the thing that
So what I'm hearing is you're saying that if you make a device which has a limited vocabulary, then the mute person who is now using sign language will have to limit themselves to that vocabulary only. So again, देखो यहाँ पे भी वही बात है. You have to look at the context. तुम किस purpose के लिए बना रहे हो? अगर तुम्हारा जो purpose है, वो है फॉर एग्जाम्पल एक बैंकिंग ऑफिसर या एक पब्लिक डीलिंग ऑफिसर के साथ इंटरेक्शन. तो एक पब्लिक डीलिंग ऑफिसर है जो उसकी बात सुनना चाह रहा है. तो अगर मैंने सपोज बैंक के लिए वो बनाया, तो बैंक में अगर कोई आ रहा है और कुछ बात कर रहा है तो कितने तरह के सवाल हो सकते हैं, कितने तरह के शब्द यूज हो रहे हो सकता है. यू रियली नीड द एंटायर डिक्शनरी देयर. That could be used to, so this is inventor principle called segmentation or local quality. कि आप खाली जो उस एप्लीकेशन के लिए रेलेवेंट वो है, आप अपने जो लाइब्रेरी है उसको उस तरह से ही कॉन्फ़िगर करें. So that majority of the use cases are handled. Now if they're using some word, अब सपोज करो मैं क्लास में तुम्हें कुछ पढ़ाने आया, ठीक है, मैंने कोई शब्द का प्रयोग करा, तुम्हें नहीं समझ में आया, तुम क्या कहोगे? हाथ खड़ा करोगे, पूछोगे व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय दिस. यू विल आस्क एंड आई विल यूज अनदर वर्ड टू से दिस. तो अगर किसी बंदे ने ऐसा कोई वर्ड यूज कर भी लिया, कोई ऐसा साइन यूज कर भी लिया जो मेरे लिए ऑब्वियस नहीं था, जो मेरे टूल के लिए ऑब्वियस नहीं था, दिस पर्सन इज इट्स नॉट अ रोबोट आई एम टॉकिंग टू. In fact, it could be a robot. It could be a robot, but if it is not a robot, or even a robot could say that I did not understand. Can you please use a different word? Yes, they'll use a different word to say the same thing. At least कोई समझ तो रहा है उनको. It is still a huge advantage. तो आपका मॉडल अगर आपको छोटा करना है तो उसके तरीके हैं. आप उसको एप्लीकेशन या यूज स्पेसिफिक बना दो, कॉन्टेक्स्ट स्पेसिफिक बना दो, ठीक है. बट डोंट गेट ओवरवेल्म्ड बाय द कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी ऑफ. कॉम्प्लेक्स तो होगा ही. कौन सा एप्लीकेशन, इसकी बात, इसको मैं बोल रहा हूँ तो मैं इसको 4 चीजें ऐड कर दे रहा हूँ. आप किसी भी एक बंदे को, we can make it so as I add more dimensions it becomes more complex. But finally the idea of adding those dimensions is not to confuse you or to overwhelm you. The idea is more to tell you that अभी आप कुएं के मेंढक की तरह जस्ट इसी को सोच रहे हो. नहीं, कुआं नहीं है, पूरी दुनिया है. अब इसके बाद आपको एक कुएं जितना ही, एक तालाब जितना ही काम करना है. आपको ओशन जितना काम नहीं करना, तालाब जितना ही करना है. लेकिन जानो तो सही कि ओशन भी एग्जिस्ट करता है. इसीलिए हम आपको वो एक्सपोजर दे रहे हैं इन दीस सेशंस कि नहीं, बच्चे की साइकोलॉजी पढ़ो, ये पढ़ो, वो पढ़ो. इसीलिए कर रहे हैं ताकि आप जानो कि आपने लिमिटेड वर्ल्ड व्यू से कोई प्रोडक्ट बनाओगे तो उसकी एक्सेप्टेबिलिटी कम होगी. Go to a higher level of abstraction, have a wider, larger world view, and then you may come. You will have to zero down to 1 or 2 applications, 1 or 2 use cases. एक प्रोडक्ट ऐसा तो नहीं हो सकता कि हर कोई यूज कर ले. ऐसा हो सकता है, लेकिन जरूरी नहीं है कि ऐसा ही हो. वो स्टार्टिंग में तो जरूरी नहीं है ऐसा हो. एप्पल को भी देखो, उसने पहले प्राइसिंग के थ्रू एंश्योर करा खाली द उबर रिच who are not technically very वो, but they want to have a, उनको बस कुछ भी दे दो, अगर अल्ट्रा प्राइसी है तो दे विल टेक इट जस्ट बिकॉज इट्स अ ब्रांड वैल्यू. उसने पहले वो बनाया, उसने बहुत सारा चीज उस पे करा, उनका यूसेज पैटर्न देखा, एंड देन नाउ इट इज एक्सपैंडिंग. तो आपको एक पर्टिकुलर मार्केट को पहले टारगेट करना ही पड़ेगा. यू कैन नॉट बी टारगेटिंग द एंटायर स्पेक्ट्रम इन द फर्स्ट गो. इट्स नॉट पॉसिबल.
we had this summer workshop, right? So the person I invited, they were initially creating different VR experiences. But when they actually launched their startup, they found कि इतने सारे experiences create करने की जरूरत नहीं है. Now they are very narrowed down onto one specific thing on like interviewing की training कैसे देनी है VR. And now that has become the primary product for these days. And rest all are use cases that perhaps they will never get into for the
Or
time.
they might get into in the
Eventually.
second stage,
Yeah.
third version of their product, third variant of the, उसका नाम ही brand ही अलग हो सकता है. Those things we can look into, but आप देखो तो सही, अपना छोटा सा उसको आप देख रहे हो versus इतनी बड़ी market, and हो सकता है उसमें there is something which is same technology के लिए more lucrative market. Target that now.
Another thing is like you mentioned about sign languages, right? Mostly you're saying it's discrete and classification based, from what I understand. So assuming, I'm not saying he, assuming that you have identified this as a research gap, fine? You have identified this as a gap the existing products में नहीं होते. So now your novelty really comes in creating something that is continuous in nature, perhaps using a different set of models, regression, different type of technologies that can support that, you know. तो आप बाकी चीजों पे भी देखो, मतलब survey all the things completely, and then you narrow it down, right? So for all of you, in fact, you will have to diverge a lot before converging. तो अगर आप ये सारी चीजें भूल भी जाओ ना कि यूजर सेंटर्ड डिजाइन है, प्रॉब्लम स्टेटमेंट एक्सेट्रा एक्सेट्रा, unless and until you diverge, you will not know when to converge क्योंकि you are already converged into something very specific.
So अभी आप एक लोकल मिनिमा पे हो या लोकल मैक्सिमा पे हो, जब तक आप थोड़ा सा अलग व्यू नहीं लोगे, आप ग्लोबल मैक्सिमा या ग्लोबल मिनिमा पे कैसे पहुंचोगे? समझ रहे हो बात को? ऑप्टिमाइजेशन कुछ तो करा हुआ है, तो अगर आप किसी मैक्सिमा या मिनिमा पे जाना है वो भी ग्लोबल, तो आपको थोड़ा सा एक लार्जर व्यू लेना पड़ेगा. नहीं तो आपको लगेगा हाँ मैं एक मैक्सिमा पे हूँ, और पता है वो छोटा सा हिल है, हिमालय पूरा आगे खड़ा है. जो आपके पास मार्केट थी, आपने जस्ट बिकॉज लोकल मैक्सिमा पे जीरो इन कर लिया, तो आपके पास मार्केट है, आपको लगेगा मेरा प्रोडक्ट फेल हो गया. थोड़ा सा जूम आउट करो, सेम टेक्नोलॉजी, मच बिगर मार्केट, गो देयर, फोकस देयर. दैट इज व्हाट वी आर ट्राइंग टू डू.
And above all, whatever you design, whatever products you come up with, novel, not novel, services, उसको इस तरीके से बनाओ कि that people are able to use it. Keep that in mind. I think things you will figure out eventually. करते रहो. It's good to be confused. That's the whole point. ना, always notice that. Yes, ऐसे खिचड़ी बनी रहती है. Then next sort of smooth. और इस phase में जब तक unless and until you go through that turmoil, things will not work. अगर आप कर ही चाहोगे कि नहीं.
See, conclusions are a death of the product. अगर आपने conclude कर लिया ना कि हाँ यही बेस्ट है, और आप रुक गए कि अब इससे अच्छा नहीं हो सकता, then that is the death of your product. Simply because आपने conclude कर लिया, ये चीज तो कोई भी replicate कर लेगा, अब आप मार्केट से बाहर. ठीक है, कभी भी conclusion पे तो आप पहुंच ही नहीं सकते. भाई कहा ना कि कुछ ना कुछ नया तो करते ही रहना पड़ेगा, इनोवेट तो करना ही पड़ेगा, नहीं तो आपका प्रोडक्ट मार्केट से बाहर हो जाएगा. और क्योंकि आपको पता है कि इनोवेट इज अ कंटिन्यूअस साइकिल, you cannot wait for perfection and the final thing to be available before you launch the product or you design the product. आपको ग्लोबल व्यू लेना है, एक पार्ट को फोकस करना है, उसके हिसाब से बनाना है, अपनी टेक्नोलॉजी को प्रूव करना है, देन वापस ग्लोबल पे जाना है, फिर देखना है और कहाँ पे आपके पास और अपॉर्चुनिटीज हैं, और उनको भी इंट्रोड्यूस कर देना और उनको भी इंक्लूड कर देना, ताकि आप कंटिन्यू करते रहो ग्रो करना. You want to stagnate as an individual or as a business or as an organization? No one wants to stagnate. Everyone wants to grow. So this is a continuous iterative process. Go through these cycles over and over and over again. एक ही प्रोडक्ट, फिर उसका वेरिएंट, मल्टीपल वेरिएंट, फिर एक नया प्रोडक्ट. Because technology evolved. ठीक है? Any questions? Anything else?
After talking, I had two ideas, right? Yesterday I had two ideas. One, the automatic air purifier. I went to my place. I had tried.
Automatic नहीं, portable air purifier.
Automatic also.
Automatic also, but portable.
Portable air purifier. Yeah.
मतलब
I tried to design it. I looked into the cost, the technology we are using, and from the design perspective, it will take more than 2 months. So I'll drop that idea.
Okay, because you have only 2 months.
Yes, I have only two things. I dropped that idea. After coming to today's class, your idea basically for the local maxima and global maxima thing, like the band could be used in many ways, right? So what right now, what I am thinking, it is a confused phase. Right now, what I'm thinking is that I'll connect the doctor and patient with one app. Okay, doctor opens the app, sends the request to patient. We have IDs. Okay, then the doctor has a catalog, like leg. He clicks on leg, or he can search whatever ankle part. Okay, he'll put a video description.
डॉक्टर को पता है कि पेशेंट की क्या नीड है.
हाँ.
डॉक्टर तो बोलेगा कि मेरे को ये वाली एक्सरसाइज इस पेशेंट को 15 रिपीटेशंस करवाने हैं.
Right. So he'll choose the catalog, he'll choose the exercise and multiply it. Okay, that information will be sent to the patient.
So for this is a good idea, but now you need to talk to a physiotherapist.
Yeah, I have thought of
You
that.
have to talk
I
to
thought
not
of
one
my
but multiple
physiotherapist, yeah.
physiotherapists, and probably some people who have gone through physiotherapy to understand कि हाँ, so physiotherapist आपको पहली बात एकदम से क्या बताएगा कि ये सब ठीक है, लेकिन ह्यूमन टच भी इंपॉर्टेंट है. कि बंदे को मैंने कहा तो सही कि 15 सेंटीमीटर उठाओ, लेकिन जब वो उठा रहा होता है तो मैं उसके पैर को हल्का सा नीचे से सपोर्ट देता हूँ और धीरे धीरे करके वो सपोर्ट हटाता हूँ. You see, so the way the exercises have to be meted out will have to be thought about from the psychology of the patient. So psychology से तुम बच नहीं सकते.
हाँ.
साइकोलॉजी अब पेशेंट की आएगी. डॉक्टर ने तो बता दिया कि ये वाले इतने रेपिटेशंस करने हैं, बट अब पेशेंट को आपको साइकोलॉजी देखना है. आपको डॉक्टर से समझना है, अच्छा बताओ पहले रेपिटेशन में यूजर को ज्यादा प्रॉब्लम आती है या लास्ट वाले में आती है या बीच में कहीं पे आती है. कहने का मतलब पहली बार जब एक यूजर पैर उठाता है तो मैंने चाहे 15 कहा, वो 10 तक ही उठा पाता है, तो मैं 10 के बाद ही कहता हूँ बीप दे दिया कि हाँ पैर नीचे करो, फिर नेक्स्ट रेपिटेशन शुरू करो. लेकिन जब मिडिल में पहुंचा तो मैंने पूरा 15 सेंटीमीटर तक उठाया, तब तक बीप नहीं दिया. लेकिन वापस जब मैं 20वें रेपिटेशन पे था, मैंने फिर से उसको 10 पे ही बीप दे दिया. मुझे पता है थक गया होगा बंदा. You see?
Yeah, I see. Okay.
So it is not कि 15 सेंटीमीटर मतलब हर साइकिल में हर रेपिटेशन में 15 सेंटीमीटर पेशेंट कर पाए. ठीक है, तो ये चीज आपको समझनी पड़ेगी, साइकोलॉजी समझनी पड़ेगी, फिर अपना आप बनाना पड़ेगा. अगेन बहुत अच्छा आइडिया, बट डोंट थिंक दिस इज इजियर. दिस इज इक्वली कॉम्प्लेक्स.
One thing,
This requires equal amount of energy and effort and interviews and discovery of use cases, needs, everything. This also requires all of that.
yeah, the difference I found out here is in the kids thing, I have to sell 4 bands. I can't go without that. But in this case, doctor knows that okay, इसकी सिर्फ लेफ्ट पैर में दिक्कत है, इसको एक ही बैंड चाहिए. तो
As a businessman, you would want to sell 4 bands.
but he would a customer
तो
won't.
बच्चे वाला प्रोडक्ट चुनना चाहिए फिर बिजनेसमैन की तरह से. तो तुम्हें
कस्टमर खरीदेगा नहीं ना.
क्यों नहीं खरीदेगा?
कस्टमर एज इन पेशेंट को अगर मैं 4 बेचने जाऊंगा तो खरीदेगा.
पेशेंट नहीं खरीदेगा ना.
वही.
तो पेशेंट वाली मार्केट क्यों टारगेट कर रहे हो? यहाँ तो सेल्स कम होंगी, ये कह रहा हूँ मैं.
कंफ्यूजन कौन से जाना है.
मैं और कंफ्यूज कर रहा हूँ तुम्हें. मेरा जॉब तुम्हें भी कंफ्यूज करना ही है कि देखो सही सोच रहे हो सकता तुम्हारे लिए हो कि नहीं, दिस इज अ इजी थिंग टू फॉर मी टू इंप्लीमेंट, दिस इज समथिंग आई कैन बाइट, देयरफॉर आई वांट टू गो हियर, जस्ट फाइन. बट जस्ट बिकॉज कोई दूसरी चीज ज्यादा कॉम्प्लेक्स है उसको अपने रेडार से हटाओ मत. इन द सेकंड वर्जन यू वांट टू गो देयर बिकॉज वहां पे एकदम से एक बच्चे को बेचा और 4 प्रोडक्ट बचे. 4 प्रोडक्ट्स मतलब कितना एक्स्ट्रा प्रॉफिट मिला मुझे. एक सेल गिव मी मोर प्रॉफिट. यहाँ पे तो खाली एक सेल गिव मी 1 प्रॉफिट. इनफैक्ट वो कह सकता ये हो जाए कि डॉक्टर कहे मेरे को 10 दे दो और 10 मैं रख रहा हूँ अपने पास, मैं अपने पेशेंट्स को रेंट आउट करूंगा. इंस्टेड ऑफ पेशेंट्स खरीदे डॉक्टर रेंट आउट कर रहा है. आप सोचो दिस कुड बी अ सर्विस मॉडल. सो नाउ यूजर एक्सपीरियंस में पेशेंट को कुछ नहीं खरीदना. पेशेंट बस डॉक्टर के पास गया, डॉक्टर ने कहा देखो मेरी विजिट की फीस ये है, लेकिन मैं तुम्हें ऑनलाइन कंसल्टेंसी दे रहा हूँ, ये डिवाइस लो, ये डिवाइस के लिए तुम मेरे को 1 महीने के लिए 500 रुपए दे दो, 1000 रुपए दे दो, 1500 रुपए दे दो. अब 1500 रुपए इज ऑलमोस्ट 3 विजिट्स ओनली. बट अब आप पूरे महीने की एक्सरसाइज तुम इस डिवाइस से कर पा रहे हो, तुम रेडिली 1500 रुपए दे दोगे. एंड डॉक्टर का भी काम कम, उसका भी वर्कलोड कम. कहाँ उसके पास हर समय he can handle many more patients now. तो बिजनेस मॉडल एंड यूजर एक्सपीरियंस साइड पे बहुत कुछ है इधर. आप कह सकते हो कि मैं डॉक्टर को सब्सक्रिप्शन चार्ज करूंगा, मैं डॉक्टर को भी डिवाइसेस फ्री दूंगा लेकिन चार्ज सब्सक्रिप्शन करूंगा कि मैं आपके हर पेशेंट का पूरा रिकॉर्ड आपको दे रहा हूँ. वो सब्सक्रिप्शन वो बंदा यूजर से ही ले रहा है, बट आप डॉक्टर को चार्ज कर रहे हो कि अप टू 10 पेशेंट्स दिस मच, 50 पेशेंट्स दिस मच, एंड आई विल स्टोर द रिकॉर्ड्स फॉर यू फॉर 3 months 6 months ड्यूरेशन. उसी बिजनेस साइड पे तो कितने सारे और यूजर एक्सपीरियंस के टर्म्स में ये बात आ जाएगी कि व्हाट इज द यूजर एक्सपीरियंस. The user could be a doctor, the user could be the patient, so many things. So जब तुम एक्सप्लोर करोगे या बाहर पहुंचोगे तो समझना पड़ेगा हर तरह की चीज के लिए. जबकि जो बच्चों का टॉय है उसमें तो हर बच्चे के लिए वो टॉय खरीदा जाएगा और वो वेस्ट हो जाएगा. उसका मतलब अब तुम्हारे को पेरेंट्स को ये बोलना पड़ेगा जब आपके बच्चे का टॉय यूज खत्म हो गया, there is a possibility of recycling. You give it back to me, I will return 200 rupees to you. This is called circular economy. अब आप उसका जो बच्चे का टॉय वापस आया, आप उसके कुछ पार्ट्स को रिट्रीव करोगे, शायद पूरा इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स पार्ट रिट्रीव कर लोगे और उसको सस्ते में बना के मोर प्रॉफिट मार्जिन के साथ वापस मार्केट में इंट्रोड्यूस करोगे. See? So there should be a way to pick up the old toy from a parent because अब बच्चे बड़े हो गए. So think about this. It could be that electronics तो exactly same है, but जो कफ का साइज है, ब्रेसलेट के कफ का साइज है, that changes with age. आप पेरेंट्स को कह रहे हो कि हाँ आप अभी ले रहे हो मेरे से प्रोडक्ट, आप बस 200 रुपए दे के नया प्रोडक्ट ले जाना जब बच्चे का हाथ का साइज बड़ा हो जाए. पेरेंट्स से अच्छा, ये तो बड़ा अच्छा है, चिल्ड्रन कैन यूज इट फॉर until 10 years of age now. और आपके लिए क्या है, आपको बस मल्टीपल मोल्ड बनाने पड़े जहां पे सेम इलेक्ट्रॉनिक्स पार्ट्स फिट हो गए. So many different things. Again, one product only. You said one idea, and there are so many ways we could think about it. तो एक कुएं के मेंढक नहीं बनना है, वही मैं कह रहा हूँ. आप ग्लोबल सोचो, बड़ा सोचो, बहुत सारे यूज केसेस अपने आप अपीयर होंगे आपके सामने, बहुत सारे बिजनेस मॉडल्स अपने आप अपीयर होंगे. अगेन, अगर तुम ये एक्सपेक्ट करोगे कि मैं तुम्हें आंसर देने वाला हूँ तो भूल जाओ. जो लोग मेरे किसी भी कोर्स को कर चुके हैं वो समझते हैं कि उनको पता है कि अनुज ने आंसर नहीं देना, अनुज ने खाली कंफ्यूज करना. बट द इंटेंट इज दैट यू शुड नो अबाउट ऑल दीज एस्पेक्ट्स एंड देन यू टेक द कॉल. उस आपका प्रोजेक्ट है ना, आपका प्रोडक्ट है. कल को इस प्रोडक्ट को आप मार्केट में ले जाने वाले, मैं तो नहीं जाने वाला. आपका कॉल होना चाहिए. ठीक है. जिसको भी और कंफ्यूजन हो तो रीच आउट टू अस. वी आर एक्सपर्ट्स एट कंफ्यूजिंग इट. ठीक है, यू कैन क्लोज द क्लास नाउ. ऑल द बेस्ट. आई वांटेड टू आस्क अबाउट द रिकॉर्डिंग एस्पेक्ट. कल वाली रिकॉर्डिंग भी है मेरे पास. YouTube पे डाल दूं, चलेगा आपके लिए?